here to support or to disagree, but there is outside some toilets if you're not used to the building, and there's a couple of machines where you can get a drink if that's something you feel you'd like to have. So at this point, I'd simply like to invite Tommy to give the fire regulations, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've not got a fire evacuation plan for tonight, but if the alarm does go off, the meeting point is the car park just to the right up there, and if you go down the stairs and back where you came in, that's the closest exit.
Thank you. And for information, just to clarify the situation, we have tonight reduced, we did make people aware a couple of days ago that because of the number of people wishing to speak tonight, we've reduced the normal allocated time by 1 minute. And I can't see Councillor Buttle or Kelder. They must be coming perhaps a bit later. Right, yes, it is bad getting into Matlock from Darley Dale. I'm just anxious that when they arrive, perhaps, Dermot, would you just mention that when the speaker, they sort of look slightly round, please. So it's quite a task for me tonight. The last time I chaired this committee was as a foolishly much younger person, and it was 1990. So here we go. Kerry, can we take apologies for absence, please?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Archer, Councillor Hughes and Councillor Melstrom, and we've got, as you say, Councillor Boothroyd, Councillor Franks and Councillor Shelley attending as substitutes.
Thank you. We turn then on the agenda to number 2, approval of minutes of the previous meeting, pages 9 to 16. Would some member consider moving those? Councillor Lees, thank you. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Slack. Any member wish to raise anything at this point from those minutes? If not, then they've been moved and seconded. Are all the members in favour that they are a true and correct record of what there and therein took place? That appears to be unanimous. Thank you, members. We move on to interests now. There are a lot of applications. Is there any particular application a member wishes to possibly declare an interest? Councillor Dobbs.
Application 5.8, unknown to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other interests? No? That's noted then, thank you. We turn then to, are we able to move to 5? That's okay. So we go immediately then to applications for determination. So if we, just lost my place at the moment. It's pages 17 to 42, members. Right. Formalisation of existing overflow car park, formation of an additional car parking area, formation of new vehicular access and associated drainage and landscaping work, the Knockerdown, Ashbourne. And this was a site visit yesterday. And the case officer that's dealing with tonight, is it Adam? It's Chris, right. Perhaps Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Before we go to the speakers, just to update members on a number of late representations that have been received. You'll see from the late representation sheet in front of you that 4 additional representations have been received from members of the public objecting to the application. Their points are summarised in that sheet. A item of late representation has been received from a member of the public in support of the development, and we've also received late comments from Carsington and Hopton Parish Council, which are quite lengthy. We've received comments from the Police and Crime Commissioner, Bradbourne and Balladon Parish Council with a subsequent email from the Vice Chair. And we've received comments from Holland Ward Parish Council. And in support of the application, we have received a statement from the applicant. So there's quite a few pages there in the late representation sheet that members will need to have regard to before we enter into debate. And as a further update, we have, following the preparation of the late representation sheets, we've received further late representations that we'll have to address verbally at the meeting. They are further representations from 2 members of the public objecting to the application. I think we can move to speakers at that point.
Thank you, Chris. So we will listen with care now. Can we first listen to Councillor Ruth Miles, who is representing Carsington and Hopton Parish Council. Ruth, if you'd like to, do you know sort of how to operate the go? Yeah, and then in a moment you've got 2 minutes.
So, is that okay? Can everybody hear me?
Can
okay?
everyone hear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, councillors. The Parish Council strongly object to the proposed application for the Knockerdown Inn. We, in our formal submission, raised the issue as to what permission currently exists for this site. We believe that the overspill car park does not have any permission to be designated as such. It must therefore follow that current planning application and the classification is for agricultural field. It is noted that the applicants only seek permission for the car park and none to regulate the camping element. A pub this size does not need many parking spaces to be run as is. After the site meeting yesterday, it was confirmed by the applicant's representative to the Parish Council's representative that the intention is to run the pub as a destination for car meets, in line with their brand and existing sites elsewhere. We were told that during peak times you will need to book a parking slot online at the cost of £10 per vehicle. A huge amount of hardscaping car park is clearly required for this business model. Where is the justification and supporting evidence for the number of spaces? Our local plan has no threshold for public houses. However, we maintain that the amount requested here is simply unreasonable and unsustainable when viewed against the size and nature of this established business. We strongly disagree that the application, if approved, would only have limited impact on the character and appearance of the area and would not unacceptably encroach on the countryside. How can what is essentially fields be enhanced by creating hardscape car parks in their place? In the refused application, the introduction of crushed gravel was considered to result in significant urbanisation effect that would be incongruous. Surely this remains. As local councillors, you're well aware that the draw of this area has with tourists coming from the outstanding countryside and tranquility of the area. We truly believe that if granted, you're opening Pandora's box and this area will never be the same again in terms of the amenities for local residents and the overbearing effect this now confirmed increase in motor vehicles to the site will bring.
Councillor Miles, I'm afraid I've just allowed you slightly over.
Thank you for that, though.
Thank you
much
very
appreciated.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'd like to hear the views now of Ms. Laura Stevens, please, who is a local resident who also is speaking against the application.
Oh, there we are. Thank you for having me. My name is Laura Stevens from Dales Climate Hub, but I'm speaking on behalf of climate campaigners everywhere when I remind you that we are already experiencing a planetary climate crisis with floods, wildfires, drought and extreme temperatures hitting all corners of our world. If you can't see it happening, it doesn't mean it's not happening. Antonio Guterres, UN General Secretary, stated at the end of March 23, every year of insufficient action drives us closer to the brink, increasing systemic risks and reducing our resilience against climate catastrophe. Heat exacerbates pollution. Pollution affects health. We know we must stop burning fossil fuels and take cars off the road. You build new roads, they fill up with cars. You create car parks, they fill up. We need to avoid creating a situation that makes things worse because there needs to be a limit. There must be a limit. Your decision tonight is important, and you can make it with ease by bearing in mind the many policies you have passed which look to protect, restore, and enhance our local environment. Quoting from the Vision Derbyshire Climate Change Strategy 22 to 25, which you approved in March 2022, the strategy looks at how to reduce Derbyshire's county-wide carbon emissions, taking into account those emissions generated directly in the county and those created outside of Derbyshire, and which the county is, in part, responsible for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I'll call Ms. Pippa Ward-Bradley, please, Friends of the Knockerdown, to speak against the application.
Good evening. I am speaking on behalf of the Friends of the Knockerdown. Whilst the second application, in C&M's words, has been significantly scaled back from the first refused application, we are extremely concerned over the intention for this current one. They wish to run it as a country pub. The previous owner ran an extremely successful operation, generating a substantial gross profit a year using the existing 29 car parking spaces. So why is there an additional 60 spaces and a new exit required? We conducted a car park survey during August, covering both lunch and evening sessions, including the bank holiday weekend, due to it always being the pub's best trading month. The average number of cars in the main car park per session was 8. In the overflow car park per session, it was less than 1. As a statement made by General Manager David Theobald, quoted in a recent news article stating that car park was too small if the inside pub restaurant approached capacity. The pub was never at capacity during August. Indeed, it was closed due to lack of staff. The highest number of cars counted in the main car park was 28 on Saturday, the 12th of August, in an evening session. With school holidays and camping offered for free, the main car park has not been full. The overspill has only required to park a maximum of 4 vehicles. So why the need? Stated on their Facebook and website pages when questioned by their followers about opening their venture in Derbyshire, they remain committed to it becoming a cult of machine venue. Whilst awaiting a planning decision, they decided to reopen it as a country pub. So it is their intention to do high-performance car events. We urge you to reject this application. There are 132 objections on the planning portal, including parishes and other bodies, plus 198 petition signatures. There was no letters of support, but as Mr. Whitmore has just said, there is now one.
Pippa,
Thank you.
Thank you. We have now Miss Pamela Hattersley, Friends of the Knockerdown, who's going to also speak against the application, please.
Having me. Do I just press?
Yeah.
Oh, it's on. Okay. Caffeine and Machine are trying to hoodwink our planning officers. From the outset, it is their aim to run the Knockerdown as a car meet venue with events and timed parking slots. This is a material change, and as such, another change of use application should apply. Their previous application for change of use was refused unanimously. Friends of the Knockerdown have researched and evidenced to you, the councillors, many issues and inaccuracies surrounding this application. To summarise, they cannot justify evidence or, more importantly, show a need to satisfy policy HC21 parking standard. Their traffic survey, conveniently taken in the beginning of March when visitor numbers are at their absolute lowest, is misleading. Therefore, there would be a detrimental impact to our road network. They attempt to evidence the amount of spaces required by inflating their covers from 110, advertised by the previous owner, to 270, stated in the application. They are using 270, mostly outdoor covers to justify 89 car parking spaces applied for. Erroneously, they refer to the Peak Park planning policy to calculate space available in the public drinking area and beer garden. These figures are incorrect. Their calculations include the kitchen, toilet, cellar, playground and pond. This cannot be classed as public drinking area or beer garden. Clearly, they are inflating square meterage to increase a parking requirement. Is the peak park policy even applicable? After closing for 12 months, they reopened at Easter. Caffeine and Machine hosted a Maybank Holiday Music Festival. Apparently, this was their busiest day of the year. Only 15 additional parking spaces were counted in the overflow. This clearly shows a lack of need. They state 100% of visitors come by car, many including day trippers, walk and cycle from local campsites and holiday cottages. Therefore, this statement is untrue. Their analysis states that there has been overspill into the local area, leading to off-site highway safety issues associated with illegal parking practice. This is false, and I note there is no evidence to support it.
I have
No
to
local
interject,
has ever
sadly,
witnessed
your
this, neither
time,
planning nor
Pamela,
highways. Thank you.
is over. Thank you. Yeah. So we turn to Mr. Tim Foxlow, a local resident, who also wishes to speak against the application.
Thank you. As a local resident and livery yard owner who lives within 1 mile of the Knockerdown, in my spare time I'm a petrolhead and race cars. I keep an eye on a number of the forums, and I have seen the excitement in comments that successful application of the C&M would mean to people. As C&M state, they exist first and foremost as a brand that caters to everyone with a love for things that move. There's a place for it at C&M. Their strapline is driving is in our DNA. I don't see a mention of running a country pub. At a closed committee meeting, there have been discussions around the ideal race road across the dam, referring to the dam blast. Who can compete the quarter-mile dash the fastest? And for the more adventurous amongst the attendees at Caffeine and Machine, there will be a 1 mile blast along the B5035 bypass towards Wirksworth. Car parking spaces are key to the C&M business model. Without this, it does not work. This has been supported by the staged expansion of the Ettington site from 40 to 170 car parking spaces now. So why would C&M want to dilute their brand by running a country pub? Clearly, this is not their long-term strategy. C&M have also stated, whilst waiting for a decision, they decided to open up the Knockerdown and run as a pub. This does not seem to have reached the high standards they promised. The TripAdvisor reviews point at poor service, basic low-quality food, the hygiene rating has dropped from 5 to 3 star, poorly trained minimum wage staff, closed during the 25th of August as no staff were available, and camping reviews of dirty toilets and others. Are they really capable of managing effectively a larger country pub? This is a disaster for local tourism, safety on our roads, and brings nothing to our community.
Tim, can I thank you for those comments in that you were well under time? So I'm sorry there's no small prize for... So if we turn now, please, to Miss Libba Jones, please, who's a local resident. And you've got, obviously, 2 minutes.
Yes, is that on? Come on.
Yeah.
Policy HC21 of the local plan addresses car parking provision for new applications. This offers 2 alternatives for calculating parking spaces. As the planning officer says, the first option is not applicable. It is also not robust because it could ultimately mean that a roadside shack could apply for 1,000 parking spaces, which is clearly ridiculous. However, the second option offered under Policy HC21 is applicable and is robust, and this requires the applicant to adequately justify with evidence their own parking provision in their planning application. Caffeine and Machine make a number of claims in their application about why they need an extra 60 spaces. If the pub is always operating at capacity, if every customer arrives by car with just 1 to 2 occupants per vehicle, and an assumption that if you increase the number of outdoor tables, you will automatically fill them. But this is a family pub, or so they claim, and these claims are not evidence. Evidence is what is required under Policy HC21, and evidence is based on fact. It is a fact that in a family pub, the average number of occupants per vehicle is higher than the 1 to 2 claimed. It is a fact, as stated by Knockerdown manager David Theobald and referred to a moment ago, just a couple of weeks ago, the pub's busiest day this year was their music fest. We monitored this event, and it is a fact that only 15 additional parking spaces were required. We also monitored car parking throughout August, their busiest trading month of the year, and it is a fact that the average occupancy of the main car park was just 8.9 spaces per session. The overflow parking was required on only one occasion, just 4 cars. In summary, there's only rarely been a requirement for any additional parking in 2023. Under accepted planning protocol, the minimum evidence required should have been a professional parking survey over a period of about a month, showing occupancy levels of the existing car park, customer survey showing how people travelled to the pub, number of customers per vehicle, and whether they had any difficulty accessing parking. We therefore submit the application be refused as the applicant has failed to adequately justify with evidence a current need for a 200% increase in parking spaces as required by policy HC 2021 of the DDDC local plan. As a development in open countryside, it is also contrary to the requirements of policies S1, S4, PD1 and PD5 of the plan and paragraph 174 of the National NPPF. Sorry, forgot what that was.
Thank you, Ibba. Would Mr. Chris Straight kindly come forward, please, and address the planning committee? And Mr. State is, in fact, speaking against the application.
Good evening, councillors and planners. I have lived in Hogneston for 35 years. The village is just half a mile from the Knockerdown, and the boundary of the parish is the hedge of the Knockerdown. Hogneston has sent in over 20 objections to this development, and its failure against more than 10 local plan policies, the extra noise and road safety. I hope this local democracy and listening skills of this committee will ensure a rejection. It's appreciated this application has been prepared in London by experts in finding ways around policy statements. I would, however, highlight it contains disingenuous facts or information that is economic with the truth in places. The transport statement provided has implied data about historical usage that we locals know is totally incorrect, and the applicant should provide truth. Their planned visitor numbers would suggest it's up to 4 times that of history. Sustainability is at the core of the development plan. It is readily calculated that 50,000 cars will bring another 2,500 tonnes of CO2 into this county. The Knockerdown is a rural pub serving walkers, campers, caravanners. There are 100 caravan spaces very close by. Traffic movements historically were much lower, and they kept the Knock very busy in summer. This valley serves both tourists and locals with places to walk, ride, horses, cycles, and enjoy wildlife and find a place for tranquility around the shores of Carsington Water. The Dam Road, or Flying Mile, is already a mecca for motorbikes to race at speeds in excess of 140 miles an hour. This development will add hundreds of car enthusiasts doing it a major problem for our stretched police forces. Please see the PCC's comments. I feel the planner's recommendation is failure to correctly address the development plan policies. Please reject.
Thank you very much, Chris. Miss Anne Wilson, please, if you'd like to. You're okay with the button?
I think so. Is it working? Yeah. With reference to my objection, I wish to highlight that the proposal does not align with the Derbyshire Dales District Council local plan strategic objectives and associated policies and outcomes, which includes the following: SO2, SO3, SO6, Policy S1, Policy S2, Policy S4, Policy PD1, Policy PD5, Policy HC19, Policy HC21, and Policy HC1E1. I would like to draw the Councillor's attention to Policy S1 as a prime example of how little attention is being paid to the planning policy by the proponent. The policy clearly states inappropriately located new development can have unsustainable consequences. It is important, therefore, that in meeting the development needs of Derbyshire Dales, care is taken to ensure the principles of sustainable development are met and community wellbeing being addressed. Noting the community is so avidly opposed to the overdevelopment of this site, I struggle to understand how this policy is being met, as this development is a perfect example of an inappropriately located new development. This is merely an example of the numerous clear misalignments to the local plan as noticed at the beginning of my address. I would like to ask the question, what is the point of a planning policy if a development like this that is so clearly misaligned on multiple counts can be approved? Whilst I understand this application is for a car park extension, the application should still align with the Derbyshire Dales District Council local plan, which it does not. I would like to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Ian Burton, please, will you come and make your representations, please? I understand you're a local resident speaking against the application.
I'm not a local resident. No.
Right.
Good evening. My partner and I, Lindsay, have driven from our home in Stratford-upon-Avon specifically to object against this application. Caffeine and Machine opened their first outlet in Ettington in 2018. At that time, no one really understood what it was all about. Let us fast forward to today. The Ettington site has developed significantly. It can now accommodate 170 vehicles and is open for over 90 hours per week. The local community around Ettington and Stratford are totally sick and tired of the constant noise these high-performance cars produce. Most clients of Caffeine and Machine drive the short distance from Ettington to Stratford while waiting for their timed entry slot. When in convoy, these drivers adopt a pack mentality. They showboat around the Stratford area. They rev their engines very loudly for no reason. They slow down to create a gap in the traffic so they can accelerate very quickly, leaving heavy tyre marks on the road, only to skid to a stop 50 metres further along. These drivers regularly become aggressive and display antisocial behaviour to other road users. They often play music at maximum volume. This all happens next to families and children out enjoying a day in Stratford. This unacceptable and dangerous behaviour will be seen in the Derbyshire Dales if this application is approved. I have been made aware that Caffeine and Machine already refer to the road across the Carsington Reservoir as Dam and Blast. It will be a competition to see who can travel across the dam in the shortest time. I realise their application is for an additional 60 parking spaces. However, this is exactly how Caffeine and Machine started at Ettington. I've been visiting and enjoying Derbyshire for over 30 years.
Ian, I'm afraid your time is over, but thank you for the representation. Miss Dawn Lewis, and I'm hoping you are a local resident.
I am.
Right.
And I am speaking as a local resident. Can you hear me okay?
Are you okay, Dawn?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Thanks. I have been going to the Knockerdown pub most weeks since it opened, up to sometimes 4 times a week. I find exiting from the current car park quite concerning. Vehicles are often travelling well over the speed limit. Visibility of oncoming vehicles from the right is poor due to a bend and hedges, and the property itself can block the view of the vehicles from the left. The road markings change just before the pub, which means that traffic travelling towards Wirksworth can often be overtaking. In order to get a good view, I have to nose out into the road to ensure that I'm not turning into a vehicle that is overtaking. Central and local government have a notorious reputation for refusing to spend money or support changes until there is a body count. A prime example of this was an officer who said, "Show me the bodies," when the risk of fire at Grenfell was discussed. Sadly, he got his bodies. I do not wish to be the body that convinces people that an alternative, safer exit from the Knockerdown is required. For anyone not supporting the need for an alternative exit, I ask this question: can you live with yourselves if I, my family, your friends are in an accident and they die? Thank you.
I'd like to invite now Mr. Nick Baker, the agent for the application, please. Nick, are you present? And you've got 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dan Macken is here to talk about the caffeine and machine operation, so I'll focus on the planning considerations and benefits. We welcome the officer's report and the recommendation to grant permission, and should take this opportunity to thank your officers for their constructive engagement with us regarding this revised proposal. As the officer's report recognises, the revised and reduced proposal is compliant with planning policy at both national and local level, including the local plan when it is read as a whole. Further, there is no objection to the application from the Highway Authority. This proposal represents sustainable development, providing an opportunity to invest in improving an existing site and business. Much has been said about the parking provision, but you will be aware that the description of development includes benefits for access and new landscaping works. The occupation of the Knockerdown by Caffeine and Machine will bring a range of public benefits, including for the local economy, with a range of employment and wider supply chain opportunities, tourism in the Dales, by offering an additional food and beverage outlet in a traditional pub setting to support the range of visitor accommodation available locally. Thirdly, for the environment, through improvements to landscaping, planting and habitats. And finally, and significantly, for highway safety, both as a result of the improved entry and exit arrangements and by providing parking to accommodate anticipated future trading peaks. And it's that future forecasting that's important, I believe, tonight. These are important benefits which will be experienced by both visitors and the local community. We therefore ask you to support the officer's recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Nick, thank you for your comments, and you're well in time. So,
thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to call then to the applicant. Now, the applicant does have 4 minutes, so it's Mr. Dan Macken.
Thank you very much. I'm Dan Macken. I'm one of the co-founders of Caffeine and Machine. First of all, thanks for allowing me a few minutes to speak. I'd like to thank the officers for their thoroughness with their review and the assessment of our application, and for acknowledging that it complies with local and national planning policy, and ultimately recommending it for approval. Caffeine and Machine was created to provide a place for people to simply be. It's a place for communities to meet, to enjoy good company, and to respect each other. And that respect extends much further than our physical sites, but within our local and digital communities too. We work with many local businesses and community facilities, and currently employ 103 people across the Caffeine and Machine company, with the majority living within 10 miles of our rural location in Warwickshire. By way of background, for those who are not aware, in August of last year we submitted a full planning application which was refused by the Planning Committee in December of 2022. I and the team have spent significant time reflecting on that decision and the feedback that we received from the council and local residents alike. We wish to work with the Derbyshire Dales District Council, the Parish Council and local residents to enhance the Knockerdown and specifically make improvements to the parking and access arrangements. The revised scheme is significantly scaled back in comparison to the proposal submitted previously. It is for a new, safer exit and a car park. The formalisation of the existing overflow car park and modest increase in additional spaces will provide sufficient on-site parking given the existing capacity of the pub and beer garden. The proposed scheme will also make improvements to the access arrangements and egress arrangements, which have been viewed by many as a positive safety enhancement to the site. In comparison to the original scheme submitted last year, the proposal removes the Emporium and Coffee Shop building, reduces the groundworks undertaken, and sites a smaller car park on flat ground close to the road and main building, complemented by additional landscaping. There will still be uninterrupted views down to Carsington Water, save for the large, recently completed jewellery centre next door. The public right-of-way has been given significant thought, and there is only one crossing point within the parking area, a grassed area to enhance the amenity of the footpath, and a knee rail to create separation from the main parking area. we would welcome access to the site using local footpaths in the area and would encourage people to enjoy the fantastic facilities available locally. There will be no intensification of use of the site as there are no additional buildings being erected nor extensions to the building itself. We are aware of comments in some representations that suggest that this is an application of stealth. I can assure you that this isn't the case, and we're very aware that if the committee is minded to grant this application, there will be close scrutiny ensuring that we adhere to what has been granted. We have no plans to expand this further, and in any event, any future planning applications would be reviewed and assessed by the planning authority. Worth mentioning at this stage that tickets we use to control capacity, not as a means of attracting further visitors. I know that comparisons have been drawn to our site in Ettington in Warwickshire, but at less than a third of the size of our first site, the Knockerdown will be a much smaller operation and not significantly larger than what is there currently. We wish to work with the local council, local authorities and parish council and local residents to make improvements mentioned to enhance this business for the local community and all those who choose to visit.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the various speakers for the application. Chris, is there anything at this point before I invite members to ask simply questions that you'd like to?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I think there's a number of points that I just need to come back on there. Members visited the site yesterday to consider the development proposals. Will have had regard to the extent of development proposed as part of this application, which includes the formalisation of an overflow parking area. Members were able to have a look at that area in terms of its current state. It was a grassed area. I think from the earlier speakers, it was indicated that during a busy period, during recent operation, evidence has only been shown of 15 cars parked in that facility. There's 29 formal car parking spaces that serves the existing pub. The proposal is for a new egress from the site to be formed, improving access to the site and also to extend and formalise the existing overflow parking area. The application indicates that 38 spaces are already accommodated within that overflow parking area. The local planning authority is unable to verify that, and no evidence has been presented to us to demonstrate that that's the case. But we do accept that it has certainly in recent times been used as an overflow facility. The proposal proposes 60 further formal parking spaces will be formed from the developments, and the applicants in their submission indicates that parking increase is necessary if the pub reaches capacity in terms of number of covers and dining within that facility. In terms of the officer assessment, this facility is a community facility, and in the local plan policy HC15 seeks to protect, retain and enhance community facilities, and this application seeks to enhance that existing facility. We accept that there is some level of intervention in terms of landscape impact. However, we feel that landscape impact is acceptable having regard to the development plan taken as a whole, hence why we're recommending approval of this application. Members will have noted when visiting the site yesterday the extent of the new parking area, the impact on the local landscape. They'll have had regard to the position of the new egress point and how that compares with the existing access arrangements. And they'll also note the position of the public right-of-way that crosses through the site and the amendments to the proposal that have been made to address that particular constraint. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Thank you very much. Will members kindly be mindful that it is questions and not statements? We will later have the debate. First of all, I want to bring in Councillor Sue Burfett, then Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Slack. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I hope this is quite a straightforward question to the planners, please. But I'd like to know how much weight you've given to the concerns of the Peak District National Park, the CPRE campaign for the preservation of rural England, and indeed the Police and Crime Commissioner when you were coming to your conclusion.
Yes,
approval.
Those matters have been considered in the officer's report, and it's a matter of planning judgment as to whether you feel that the development is acceptable in accordance with the relevant provisions of the development plan. And members are entitled to take a view in terms of whether this development is necessary to sustain the existing business and the impact that it has on the local environment and the character and appearance of this part of the countryside. And that's a matter of planning judgment. We've put a recommendation to you, and it's for you to decide whether you agree with that recommendation or you do not agree with it.
Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Chair. Chris, just a question around, because you've picked it up as well in terms of the equation between the amount of covers that the restaurant offers or the pub offers and how that translates to parking spaces. But I think we've had kind of at least 2 members of the public raise queries about the calculation of those not being correct. And I just wonder what due diligence we've done in terms of either just accepting on face value what the plan has said, or have we actually interrogated that to check?
I think it's fair to say that we've accepted the information that's been presented to us on face value. We've acknowledged in the report that there's no maximum standard for a use of this nature. We have to bear in mind you've got the existing public house and the events that it may wish to hold, which would be ancillary to that existing use. And you've also got the caravan and camping offer on the site as well. And we consider it to be a commensurate or reasonable amount of expansion of the existing facility. But it's a matter of judgment.
Yes.
I just come back on it, Chris, because it would seem to me that kind of the existing operation isn't kind of needing that many parking spaces currently. And because we're not expanding the operation in terms of buildings, I'm a bit puzzled by that.
I think in your assessment of the application, if you felt that the amount of development was unjustified, then that's something you can take into consideration, because you could argue that in itself is intrinsically harmful to the character and appearance of the area if the development's not justified. But it's a matter of judgment.
Councillor Peter Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, the character of the area, how did you come to judge the character of the area to put a big, massive car park like that without making much comment about it?
We are in the countryside here. We accept that it's currently a field and part of that will be developed. We're at a road junction. You've got a tourism offer on the opposite side of the road, and we've had regard to the amount of impact on the local landscape, and we feel it to be within an acceptable limit, hence why we're recommending approval of this application. But it's for you to consider whether you agree with that or not.
Thank you for that reply.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sorry to have to say this, but Chris, have we been misled by this applicant? I was going to ask the same question as our friend over here, Nick, and how on earth are we using peak park policy to about parking to make judgments and calculations on what's required?
Yeah, just to clarify on that point, the applicant, my understanding is the applicants used peak park policy in their justification for this development. We've assessed it on its merits and had regard to the policies in our development plan in the round. There being no maximum standard for a facility of this nature.
Any further questions, Councillor Murphy?
Not at this moment.
No, okay. We turn to Councillor Peter O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. And this too is a follow-up to Councillor Whitehead's question. Chris, are you satisfied that you have fully assessed the evidence presented by the applicant to justify the level of additional car parking such that it complies with our local plan policy LC21?
Just to clarify, HC21, the parking standards policy, yes. We've put the recommendation to you on the basis that we're satisfied that we feel there's appropriate information submitted with the application for us to be satisfied that the proposals will be compliant with development plan policies.
Councillor Roger Shelley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I notice this time around we've got a comment from the Police and Crime Commissioner. In addition, of course, we have the comment from the Highways Authority as well. And the Highways Authority's comments seem to be very, very thin on this. They're relying entirely on their on the basis of their argument from the previous application. Can you tell me if the Police and Crime Commissioner speak to the Highways Authority in relation to this kind of matter?
Two departments are separate entities. I mean, I can't verify whether or not they have communicated with one another. The Crime Commissioner appears to be looking at antisocial behaviour and potential issues with patrons of that facility in terms of how they would use the facility and access roads and drive on those roads and the safety of that operation. But that sits outside of our remit in that planning controls can't impose restrictions or seek to police how people behave on public roads. That's a criminal or a matter for the police and not the local planning authority. We have to trust that people will act in a reasonable manner.
Do you have a supplementary question, Roger? No.
Just an observation that we can't necessarily trust people to act in a reasonable manner.
Yeah. Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Just a point of clarity with highways. I remember back in November last year talking to Highways about the previous application and their thin offering when it came to the application. Because if you do any research and you look at the accident profile on that piece of road, it's terrible, you know, and it's data that they hold. But I was advised that at county, when it comes to making observations on applications like this, they look at only just outside the actual boundaries of the application. They don't take into account, you know, the road safety issues that might be further afield. I know that a lot of people in Derbyshire Dale struggle with that. I struggle with that because it's evidence that there is a problem. And thanks, Chair, for letting me say that.
Councillor Murphy, I'm going to let you get away with that question because you bought me a cup of coffee yesterday in Ashbourne, didn't you? Right, finally, perhaps Councillor Peter Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, could you clarify the line between planning and licensing in this respect? Because I understand this pub has held a music festival. It's about to hold a dog show. Could it, under its current licensing and its current green car parks, hold a car show?
My understanding is that the existing licence is in association with the use of facility as a drinking establishment, and the proposal for any car meets, there's no change of use of the building proposed as part of this application, and that would be an ancillary offer to the drinking establishment use. The licensing restrictions will be specific in relation to that existing facility. It wouldn't extend necessarily to car meets. There would be no licensing control in that respect.
Councillor Buckle.
Thank you, David. Did we ask the police in their designing out crime brief to make a comment?
The application proposes formalisation of an overflow car parking area, an extension of that, and a new access. So in design terms, that is the development. If you're implying that as part of that development, that's going to introduce a certain type of use or activity, then that would sit outside of the scope of consideration of this application.
No implication was intended.
Members, I'd like us now, if there are no further questions, to go into the debate, and I want to invite the ward member, please, first, Councillor Peter Sack, to.
Thank you, Chairman. This application came last year and it was dismissed. This is very similar along the same lines, really. It's not buildings, but there's nothing to stop marquees going up and things like that. This is an open countryside. Carsington was created for its beauty, and lots of people get pleasure out of it. Families come along, the play area, and they enjoy the sunshine, and when it does sunshine, not always, they enjoy the leisure and quietness and relaxation. Now, this is a completely different issue. this is something coming into the area we've never seen before. And from the speakers from Warwickshire, he outlined what we're going to expect if this was allowed to go through. And it's uncharacteristic of the area. It's out of character, total out of character. To have a great big massive car park there, it'll be there all winter, and we'll see it like a block on the landscape. It's out of character, totally out of character. And as one of the speakers said, look at how much carbon they're going to bring into the area. With these big high-performance cars coming in, they're going to come up the bypass at tremendous speeds. I did put this forward last time, and I got my fingers rattled because you said it was county council issue. But it isn't. It may be a county council issue, but it relates to public safety, and you're going to have a lot of cars racing on the dam wall. There's a enormous lot, and they're going to come through from. In fact, they'll link up to Matlock Bath actually. All the motorbikes in Matlock Bath will be coming up and going backwards and forwards. It's going to be a lot of chaos in that area, and a lot of people are going to be inconvenienced with noise and carbon, and it's just not on to do this. And I'm dead against this, and I support all the speakers who spoke tonight of the really give good views on this, and I hope the planning officers realise that there's a strong local, in my ward, a strong local objection against this, and they're dead against this. So I recommend that we refuse the application.
Thank you. So, in order for the motion to go forward, we need a seconder. That is seconded by Councillor Sue Burfoot. The debate is now open. We've got an actual motion before the committee. Councillor O'Brien, please.
Thank you, Chair. I support the proposal to refuse the application. I accept that there may be a case for a modest extension of the car park. There may be a case for a modest extension. I think, however, that the two principal reasons I give for refusing this application are that no substantive evidence has been produced to justify the need for such a significant extension of car parking facilities, and the design, layout and construction of the car park itself, proposed car park itself, would adversely affect the intrinsic rural character of the landscape of this part of the Derbyshire Dales. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I am more than happy to second this recommendation for refusal. I think we have to remember when we're here as a planning committee that we have to actually make our decision based on what is actually in front of us. It's not our job to predict what the applicant's future plans will be. That's not the role that we've got tonight. But having said this, that we have to consider, what I would say is that I will be considering, or have considered, listening to what's been said, that there isn't a justification that's been put forward for an increase to 99 car parking spaces for what is a country pub. I would suggest, following on from what certainly one member of the public said, one resident, that there is clearly sufficient car parking at the moment, perhaps with an additional 15 or so car park spaces required in the overflow car park. What I'll also be considering tonight, or what I have considered to come to the view that I've come to, is that there will be an impact on the character and appearance of the local area. We've got our policies in planning to preserve the natural environment and the local area. the National Park have clearly got concerns, CPRE have clearly got concerns, and one of the aims of national parks is to preserve the tranquility of the area. Now, this isn't in the national park, but it's very close. And finally, I just have to talk really about sustainable development. I mean, it couldn't get really more unsustainable as this. Here we're talking about an increase to 99 car parking spaces. What is a car parking space for? It's for cars. So by the very nature, whatever their future intentions are, if they were to get this planning application approved, they want to fill 99 spaces. Why would they do it otherwise? And therefore, that is not sustainable, in my opinion. And that's why I absolutely go along with Councillor O'Brien's view.
Stuart Lees and then Councillor Murphy and Waitman. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Totally agree with all the other councillors' comments and listening to all the speakers as well. It is a very dangerous road, as most of you are aware. I spent 30 years in the fire service and I've cut many of people out of these roads, particularly on the Carsington Road and on the road past the Knockerdown. It's a hazardous roads, and it's just going to create more hazards. So I'm totally in agreement. It's, like Mrs. Burford said, it's not in keeping, and I totally agree with what the rest of the councillors have said so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. A lot of the things I was going to say have already been said, which, and most of them were obvious from what we've been hearing. But as the county councillor for that part of the world, I get lots of emails, and I visit parish councils, and I hear all the time about the complaints that people have about the noise, the racing on these country roads, people racing on the dam wall, and whatever. And the sad thing is, there's very little that I've been able to do so far. It's very difficult to, unbelievably, to get the police to become particularly interested. I grew up in darkest Lincolnshire, and maybe that was the days when there were traffic police in cars and whatever, and they would be all over the issues that we've got in this part of the world. And within a few weeks, I'm pretty sure, a lot of it would stop. But we live in different times. I 100% support rejecting the officer's recommendation. I think about the previous application we had in December, and the things that we considered about the environment, sustainability and whatever, and it just surprises me and disappoints me that we've got this application. It's using a different method to actually achieve this extra car parking, which is obvious for a car enthusiast venue. It's not for anything else. I mean, that is a very successful pub up till recently, and they thrived on the 29 car parking spaces and a little bit of overflow they had. Thank you, Peter, for recommending we reject this. I'm 100% with you. Thank you.
For members' information, we're going to take comments now from Councillor Mark Waitman, followed by Councillor Peter Dobbs, and then Councillor Roger Shelley. Does anyone else wish? Right, so Councillor Waitman, please.
Yes, two quick ones, Chair. I also attended scenes of accidents there when I was a young gentleman, and I worked for Derbyshire Dales up there, and we used to have to go and clean up after all the accidents, and there was many dead ones up there, fatal ones. It was really bad. The other one is I see that the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust were commented on it, but the bird study group wasn't. the bird study group take photographs up there every week, and they, up until this afternoon, they didn't know this application had gone in. So if he comes in again, can we please let the bird study group know?
Right, thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Waitman. Councillor Peter Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. This is probably not going to get a round of applause. I think we have a bit of a problem if we go with how I sense people are suggesting to turn down officer's recommendation, is we will still have a pub there. It'll still be owned by the same people. It'll only have one entrance and exit because we haven't put in a second one, and they can still hold a car meet on the grass, if I understood Chris's reply to that. So in one sense, with all the accidents that you've just been telling me about, we'll still be in arguably a no better situation. There is a problem here. Some things we could have addressed in a different way, but I sense the mood of the meeting and I will stop talking now.
Councillor Shelley.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard some very emotive arguments, but ones that I think, on balance, are based on fact and reality. There wouldn't be as many people here tonight if they didn't feel strongly and rightly that there was a serious issue here. But I accept that the officers have put together, a lot of time and effort into this report, and we have to try and help them, and indeed the council, if it comes to a situation where we're faced with an appeal. So all I'm saying is that from my reading of policies S1 and S4, the expansion that we're looking at here, which is a threefold expansion of the car park, clearly takes us beyond the realms of sustainability and protection of the existing development in the countryside. So those would be the areas that I would be looking for the council to defend a rejection of this application, and that's what I'll be voting for. Thank you.
Members, we've had a thoroughly good debate. We've had lots of public involvement tonight, and I hope everyone in this room feels that the application's been, in a fair and open way discussed. So I'd like us now to test the motion. The motion is for refusal, and perhaps with officers, the mover and the seconder after the meeting or at another occasion can in depth give those actual reasons. You can do it. Right, if you would please, Chris.
Yeah, just to tidy up, I suppose.
Yeah.
Just to make it absolutely clear, I think the majority of members have considered issues that are material to the assessment of this application. There is a danger of supposition in relation to Councillor Slack's comments, because we're not considering here a material change of use of the site. I think we just need to make that absolutely clear. We are just considering developments associated with the ongoing operation of the public house. And I think the motion that's been put on the table is a defendable position. And my understanding of that is that, in terms of how I'd frame that in a reason for refusal to capture what Councillor O'Brien has put on the table, is that insufficient information has been submitted to demonstrate the need for the amount and scale of additional car parking to support sustain the existing public house. Such development of the scale and nature proposed constitutes an unjustified and unsustainable form of development that is intrinsically harmful to the character and appearance of this part of the countryside, contrary to, and I've picked up on policies S1, S4, PD1, PD5 and HC21 of the adopted Derbyshire local plan and policy contained in the National Planning Policy Framework. So I think that captures the essence of what you're saying.
Are the mover and seconder happy with those reasons? Yeah. Members, then, it's been moved and seconded that this application be refused. All those in favour, please show. Any to the contrary? Any abstentions? One abstention. Therefore, the motion is carried and the application is refused. If people wish to leave now, or you can remain, it's entirely up to yourself. that's fine. I've got it. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Yes. Pass the sweets around. Tommy, I don't mind you even passing them on. Yeah. They won't get this every meeting, but...
It is a small world.
Members, if you would be mindful, we would like to bring forward the next application, which is the change of use of land and erection of 3 glamping domes. It's pages 191 to 198 on the, is that right, on the agenda? No, sorry, it's pages 177 to 190. We visited this site yesterday, and I would simply like to invite Councillor Jason Farmer, who is a member of the Darley Town Council, to speak in favour. I was present and listened when it came before the Town Council, and on that occasion the applicant had certainly responded and achieved all the concerns that the Town Council at that point were anxious about. So, Councillor Farmer, you've got 2 minutes, and I'll invite you now, please, to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I represent Darley Town Council and would like to speak in favour of this application. Our council have worked hard on considering this application and made suggestions in consultation with the applicant to cover additional needs that we both felt were important. The domes are a small select group of 3 domes and will blend well into the surrounding landscapes. Many of the committee members observed that on the site visit yesterday. All of the domes are planned with disabled access, and as are the associated access paths. Solar generation and EV charging will be provided on site. This location is a beautiful country setting and is accessed by a typical Derbyshire countryside road. Planning officer's reports details that the location isn't served by public transport. I can understand this, but as it's a remote location, many similar campsites and indeed log cabins exist do not have those public links either. The site owner is providing a bike loan arrangement to allow future guests to cycle and enjoy the area, or indeed they can do what normal people do, walk around the area. Farming in this modern era has changed. There is an increased running cost to running a farm, leaving farmers with no other option but to look at other avenues of revenue. This is something that this applicant has done. It is important to this particular family, as this is the 3rd generation of farmer to farm at this particular farm, and they look to keep this farm trading for the next 25 to 30 years in order to pass the farm on to the next generation. Tourism is a service that the Derbyshire Dales supports. This is a perfect example of a smaller site enhancing the future viability of the farm, helping safeguard the land from potentially what everybody else thinks is the future, which is housing development. Therefore, I conclude that Darley Town Council fully support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Farmer. Yep. And I will invite now the applicant, please, Miss Georgina Mosley, please, to address the committee. And Georgina, you've got 4 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Georgina Mosley and I'm the third generation to farm the land at Burleyfields Farm. The farm has been in the Mosley family for over 60 years. My partner Dan and I run 100 suckler cows and 500 sheep. Dan is the only full-time farmer working on the farm, with myself helping part-time between raising our 2 young children and my job as a teaching assistant. Dan is a passionate farmer who strives to produce the very best livestock and farm the land traditionally. He takes great pride in his animals. Farming is a difficult industry at the best of times, but currently farmers' costs have trebled. And whilst farmers are getting a good price at market for their livestock, this still isn't enough to cover the increased price in feed, medicines, fertilisers and replacement stock. For example, buying replacement sheep, which is vital to keeping a young, healthy and productive flock, has increased £30 to £40 a head this year. Selling our lambs at market remains the same price as last year. Corn to feed our calves was £228 a tonne 2 years ago. This year it's £322 a tonne. Each week we read in the Farmers Weekly magazine of farmers up and down the country selling up and coming out of the industry because they simply cannot make it pay. My proposal is a small-scale development tucked away in a corner of the farm that will promote rural tourism. The 3 geodomes will be fully en suite, each with their own kitchenette catering for families and couples. The site will be fully inclusive with access for disability via ramps onto the raised decking and mesh reinforcement on all pathways and car park. There are currently no other glamp sites offering this type of accommodation in Derbyshire, meaning the proposal will bring new tourists to the Peak District or retain tourists who love the Derbyshire Dales but wish to try a different style of accommodation. The finish of the domes will be to a high standard, providing comfort, luxury and relaxation, an environment where mental health can be recharged and invigorated. I've thought carefully about foul water management to ensure it is dealt with in the most efficient and environmentally friendly way. The wastewater would be dispensed into a sewage treatment plant. This is not the same as a septic tank. A sewage treatment plant breaks down the solid to produce a cleaner, non-polluting effluent that is 95% clean. A small welcome hamper as well as a small honesty shop will provide guests with everyday essentials, all of which will be locally sourced. We will be offering bike and e-bike hire to our guests by teaming up with a local business. Guests will have the opportunity to use our shuttle service to take them to locations within a short radius. The installation of EV charge points will attract a wide range of visitors while helping to reduce harmful emissions. We're installing bird and bat boxes, creating wildflower spaces and planting flowers and shrubs that will enhance the wildlife. 22% of the area around the farm is woodland. That is a lot of carbon being stored. My family and I have a good relationship with the neighbours, all of whom support this proposal, as you can see from the letters that accompanied this application and the online public comments of support. Not one of them is against this. I've lived on Bent Lane nearly the whole 38 years of my life. I feel extremely lucky and privileged to live in such a beautiful area. I don't want to change that, but Dan and I need to diversify our income to secure the farm's future and leave a legacy for our 2 children that are already showing a keen interest in farming. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I invite members' questions, Adam, if you'd perhaps like to make some comments first.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this brief, given the amount of work on the agenda. Members visited the site yesterday, and as we saw, the proposal was for the erection of 3 clamping domes, as shown up there on the plan, and as set out on that plan within the field. I think the 2 key issues in assessing this application is whether development is acceptable in principle, bearing in mind the provisions of policy EC9, which does require development of this type to be in a sustainable location in or on the edge of settlements and within a 10-minute convenient and safe walk of public transport, and the landscape impact of the development. We didn't really get much time to look at it on site before the weather came in, but obviously this is an elevated position on the valley side and there are views across to the Peak District National Park, so that needs to be considered as well. and also take into account the benefits to the farmers, as set out eloquently there by the applicant. So happy to answer any questions.
Members, Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Adam. Kind of having a look through the application, it seems to be a very well proposed and designed sort of application. I'm quite minded to sort of go against your recommendation and support it. My key question, though, is around the second kind of point that you've highlighted in terms of kind of why we rejected it, and it was the nighttime impact. So that's the thing I'm most interested in, because you talk about the materials of the domes. So are these going to be domes that basically sit on the landscape and light up as orbs, which can be seen for miles around? Or am I interpreting that wrong? Is it just a little bit of light pollution or a lot?
It's a matter of judgment, really. I mean, you can see on the plan up there, they are glazed domes, but the vast majority of it will have a plastic, think it's a plastic covering, which will be green, and it's up to members to consider, the precise finish of that. But as you can see, the sort of the front, almost like a mouth of it, will be open, and it's that part that will be illuminated. Whether the rest of the material will glow when it's illuminated, I'm not sure. I'd suspect the power of the lighting inside probably won't be high enough to do that. But ultimately, it's a matter of judgment upon how visible these structures will be in the wider landscape.
No, thank you. That's helpful. I don't think they'll be as bright as I was envisaging.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Have you taken into account, in your report, you mentioned there's no public transport there, but have you taken into account that EVs are going to be put there? And we're moving forward into a new age now. We're getting away from carbon vehicles to electric vehicles, and that should be taken into account as a good point. Would you agree?
It is a point in favour of the development. That is considered in the report. I think the key thing from a sustainability point of view is to avoid private vehicle movements where possible as a first point, because you're right, I mean, I own an electric vehicle, so I know they're a lot more efficient compared to internal combustion engine, but they are still quite an energy-intensive form of transport compared to public transport. So our current policies do try and steer development spatially to more sustainable areas. But that is definitely a point which you can take into account, yeah.
Councillor Mark Wakeman.
Yes, Chair. I think this application looks spot on. The only thing is, as I can't see it in here anywhere, has it been suggested about having solar panels? Is that ever discussed?
Yes, there are solar panels as part of the development.
Oh, I must have missed that. Okay, thank you.
And if you look on the plan there, they're sort of in the top corner of the field. That's where they're proposed.
Members, we had a very useful site visit yesterday, so I think it would be good to move now to test the feeling of the meeting. I'll bring in one of the ward members if you're prepared to propose a motion, Councillor Franks.
Yes, I do support this application. I think it's very environmentally sensitive. It's exactly what's needed to preserve our cultural heritage of farming, this sort of a development. I strongly move going for a vote and approval of this.
Councillor Slack. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. It's open now for debate. Are there any members? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I don't necessarily disagree with the proposal to approve the application, but I want to say that I think if this application is approved, we place our officers in an impossible position with respect to this policy. The application itself, to me, is clearly against the policies which this council has approved. If we approve it, we're therefore effectively saying, and this is not a special case, you could make the arguments in favour of this application for every single similar application, and there will be many similar applications. So I think what I'm saying is we need to be mindful that somehow we need to convey to our officers that the policy itself perhaps needs an urgent review and can't wait until the local plan is reviewed, because we're going to continue to get applications along these lines. Our officers are going to continue to recommend refusal for reasons they've set out here, and we are going to continue to go against our officers' recommendations. I'm not sure that we're in a helpful situation here. I just want to point out, as I said to members, that we as a council have approved a set of policies, and unfortunately this application is contrary to every single element of those policies. So we in approving it, we do need to be mindful of that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bryan. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor O'Brien said, we are putting our officers in an impossible position when they have to give a recommendation on these applications. But to me, there are so many positives about it. Yeah. There's the economic benefit to the local economy. We've got farm diversification. We've got EV charging points being proposed. We've got a shuttle bus. And I think we're here again with this policy that we've got for sustainable development in rural areas. Our local plan needs, this particular aspect of our local plan needs, as Councillor O'Brien said, it needs to be looked at urgently. This is not the first application that we've had where this committee has, because of what we feel about it, we've gone against officer recommendation, and I suspect that that's what we'll do tonight.
I'd like next to take Councillor Roger Shelley and Councillor Neil Buckle. Councillor Shelley.
Thank you, Chair. I disagree that we're putting officers in an impossible position. Our role is, as their role is as well, to look at the policies and make a judgment on those. And we're making a slightly different judgment, perhaps, but one based on what we've heard and what we've read. And it's certainly the case with this application that the applicant has put a lot of time and effort into mitigating some of the concerns that were previously there. So I would come back to that point that, yes, on paper, a policy can look one way, but our role is to interpret that policy in the light of the circumstances with which we're provided. And as a local ward member, I believe that the applicants sufficiently comply with those concerns and that we won't be faced with any challenges in this particular instance. And so for that reason, I would like to support the motion to accept this application.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Buckle.
Thank you, David. You know, we've got the sustainability problem again. We've had it loads of times and we'll come back to it. I was hoping we could just take a little bit of the sting out of this by possibly adding a couple of conditions, if that's possible, something to do with some screening, so when they're doing some planting around the edge, the structures aren't particularly noticeable at night, whether or not it's possible to come up with a lighting program or something like that, something just so that we're giving a definite nod of the head towards the fact that you have issues which you're having to deal with, and while we as a council are wanting to turn days into stays, and so we are going to support things like this, it would be nice to be a little bit more helpful towards the officers.
Would the officer like to comment on that at all?
Yeah, first I'd just say, from an officer's view in terms of interpreting policy, I think Councillor Shelley's approach is probably correct in terms of you should consider what are the particular circumstances and what you're taking into account when assessing and considering that policy. In terms of conditions, I've got some draft conditions which I'm happy to go through if members would like that. Statutory time limit for implementation, stately approved plans, impose the conditions recommended by Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, agree details of foul drainage, and agree and implement a scheme of hard and soft landscaping, including the track, and that could include some sort of planting in front of the glazed areas, perhaps to mitigate that impact from the lighting. Development should not be occupied until the access track and parking area have been provided and thereafter maintained. No external lighting other than in accordance with an approved scheme. Agree the colour finish of the surfacing material for the glamping domes themselves. Require that the EV charge points be installed before first occupation of the development. Restrict occupancy of the glamping domes to temporary holiday accommodation. Remove permitted development rights to prevent any tents, caravans or habitable buildings being erected on the site other than those expressly authorised by the permission, and to remove permitted development rights for any other development required by conditions of a site licence.
Thank you, Adam. Members, I'd like us to now take the vote, please. We've got a motion before us, and then if there's still anyone that's really, you know, so uncomfortable, you can move an amendment and then test the feel of the meeting that way. But it's been moved and seconded that we grant approval. All those in favour, please show. To the contrary, abstentions. One abstention. So therefore, the application has been approved. Thank you. So we will revert back to. Oh, sorry, Councillor Buckle.
When we just approved that, did we approve that with that list of conditions?
I think the spirit of the motion is that, yes, we want to embrace, I would say, I know it's a bit loose, but
Possibly.
we take on board, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so if we turn back to the agenda, I just need to find my place now. This I've huddled up. After this one, Sue. So this is the, yeah. So we turn to page 45 of the agenda, which is the application pertaining the Woodyard, Derby Road, Homesford, Matlock. And again, we have some speakers. Trying to find the spot. We will start first listening to Mr. Stephen Walton, a local resident, who has 2 minutes to speak against the application. So, Mr. Walton, are you happy with the button?
Good evening. Well, here we are again. This one will just not go away, will it? Almost to the point of madness. With all the relevant information regarding the unsuitability of this site at your disposal, of which you have read, it is pointless of me, or anyone else for that matter, to go over it again, as nothing in the application has changed. Does not the landowner understand, regardless of all the other negative points, that if any occupier of a site located here, vulnerable or other, were to come to harm, either on the busy A6, only a metre away, the railway track, itself a matter of metres away, or even in the River Derwent, again within a few metres, that there would be consequences and questions to answer, especially for those responsible for sanctioning the site suitable for family occupation. He and his advisers appear to think that the council's own requirement for a traveller site to be enough to override all planning considerations, in the belief that they will purchase it from him for this purpose. It seems to have become an obsession to the point of almost demanding them to accept it. All of his dialogue has focused on this, playing on the continuous use of, inverted commas, the powers of suggestion to detract from the fact that the application is flawed. It now borders on a plea which is clearly apparent in his appeal to the Secretary of State for the refusal of his previous identical application, where Mr. Hewitt, in the closing sentences of his summary, asks, and I quote, "Inspector, please allow this appeal." Need I say more? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. I invite now Dr. Spencer from the Derbyshire Gypsy Liaison Group to comment on the application, please. Dr. Spencer, you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Right, I've said it once, twice, and again, we've got elder disabled people and carers are struggling to cope with no facilities. They can't do another winter. You have to imagine the freezer winter struggling to the laundrette with washing, hauling water. The job is hard enough for carers in a home with central heating and all mod cons. These are material considerations for this site. Some time ago, I believe around 2008, I went out one weekend and made a list of sites that could be considered for gypsy traveller sites. This was undertaken as there was a judicial review at that time with regard to a homeless application, and this land was put on our list, DGLG list. 2014, families were identified in the gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment within the Derbyshire Dales. So that's more than 15 years of waiting. The GTAA showed at that time an immediate need of 6 pitches, and now that has increased. DGLG have been very proactive in assisting in finding land. We applied for Water Lane at Ashbourne. It was not Derbyshire Dales that found that site, but us, and it did get your borough plan through, and we withdrew our objection as we believed the site had been found at this time. So you can inwardly digest this sad and sorry history of no council provision at all. There needs to be a positive response now from the council on the land at the Woodyard. We did obtain a 3-year permission for it. However, there was no money for us to invest in it for the accommodation. I also believe that the council should act quickly to secure this site for its social accommodation pitch provision as identified in the GTTA. This site meets all the criteria set out in your call for sites some years ago, reflected on unsustainable sites put forward such as Tansley. I can't for the life of me understand now the reasonings to refuse. In light of there being no site coming forward, read the local plan review, it's my honest belief that when the Woodyard comes to appeal, the planning inspector will pass it, as you've absolutely no provision. DGLG has obtained sites across the country on land far less sustainable, and it's really frustrating not to have obtained one here where there is such great social need. So please pass this site.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Yep, thank you.
Thanks very much.
And our next speaker is Mr. John Ewart. John, you've got 2 minutes, please.
Ready?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the owners of the Woodyard, the Hodgkinson. Firstly, history. 2008, Dr. Spencer recommended the land to Paul Wilson. 2013, following public consultation, Council chose it as the most suitable that it's seen. For 15 years, the Council have shown no respect and no duty of care to the owners of the Woodyard. They've been denied legitimate alternative planning and interference with sales, horrendous treatment, including wrongful arrest of Andrea at Manchester Airport, who was taken to Buxton Police Station, Chesterfield Court, for incorrect and unreasonable enforcement. Both main party members say permanent provision must be made as soon as possible. December 22, Paul Wilson asked, thank goodness, to lease the land for travellers. And we have one witness statement from a Derbyshire councillor who said, after a long conversation with the Hodgkinsons and with Paul Wilson, he said, in short, that the council unfortunately can't afford the going value of this site and have therefore tried to knock the value down. My clients have been unfairly stuck in the middle of a fight between travellers and council, causing immense harm, including to Andrea's health. Now, Chairman, the good news. Should this application be approved, experienced developers have offered to buy the 8-pitch site, including the pitch for a warden. They have offered to liaise with Siobhan and with Rob, our housing director and lease the site back to the council. This, in my view, is a positive solution which will provide the travellers with a place to live.
John, I have to interject. Sorry, your time is now up.
Please end this long-standing saga and approve the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your understanding.
Thank you.
And I'd like to invite the agent, Mr. Roger Yarwood. Please, Roger, if you'd come. And you've got 4 minutes, Roger.
Thank you. Here we go again. Finding, as I said last time, finding travel sites is a nightmare. And as the former advisor to the National Federation of Gypsy Liaison Groups, I've worked with and more often against authorities across the country trying to get sites allocated and approved. Most councils struggle to find traveller sites. Derbyshire Dales are doing worse than most, as is evident from the encampment on Matlock's main car park. I was trying to find a site for travellers when I was head of planning here over 20 years ago. But here at last you have an opportunity to partly solve the problem. Your officers say it's unsustainable development. But having secured permission for more than 50 traveller sites across the country, I can truthfully say that this is one of the most sustainable sites I've been involved with, and it's one of the closest to community facilities. Traveller sites are usually regarded as sustainable if they're within 3 miles of a range of community facilities, particularly where there's a level footpath and a bus service. When it embarked on its recent search for traveller sites, the council said it was looking for potential sites within 5 miles of community facilities. This site's less than 3 miles and meets all the criteria set out in your call for sites. So refusal on this application as unsustainable simply doesn't stack up. And if you refuse this on grounds of unsustainable location, you'll give yourselves an impossible hurdle in future efforts to find a site. Whenever you consider adopting a traveller site, you'll have to show it's more sustainable than this. Otherwise, you'll give anyone wishing to oppose the chosen site a cast-iron argument to oppose it. So you can either make some provision for a traveller site right now, or make your continuing search for a site virtually impossible, because wherever a site's found, it won't compare favourably with this one. Your previous searches prove how impossible it will be to find a more sustainable site. Look at Tansley and Hasker, for instance. The World Heritage objection is very weak. As the head of planning here, I was involved in securing World Heritage status for the Derwent Valley. I can assure you that designation had and has nothing whatsoever to do with preventing development of this sort. World Heritage status should only be used to prevent development which would harm any of the heritage assets which contribute to its designation. This application has no impact whatsoever on World Heritage assets. There are more mobile home campsites than this, more prominent mobile home sites than this throughout the World Heritage site. The flood issue is nonsense, and I understand there's now a letter at last from the Environment Agency which acknowledges that the flood map is wrong and the site is not at risk from flooding. In contrast to other sites, there's been very little opposition here. Some people have pointed to conflict with the previous appeal decision. Don't be swayed by that argument. That appeal was 8 years ago, before the adoption of the current local plan, and when the appeal inspector was persuaded that the council was going to allocate a deliverable site elsewhere. So the circumstances were entirely different then. And I'm confident the current appeal, set for a hearing in October, will succeed. But I urge you not to wait for the outcome of that appeal. If you approve this proposal now, traveller site provision can be made without delay, the appeal can be withdrawn, and this will save everyone time, uncertainty and expense, and you will deserve the gratitude of the residents of the Derbyshire Dales. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. And at running the risk of this being the last meeting I will chair as chairman, what intrigued me about the World Heritage comments was you've got the crumbling East Mill in Belper, which is supposed to be the jewel of the crown. So, you know, it'd be rather nice if they got their own house in order, because it's an absolute disgrace when you go into Belper and see that magnificent building in the state that it just continues to linger on in. I'll bring in now the relevant planning officer, Chris, and then it will be open for questions.
Thank you, Chair. Before I introduce this item, I just want to draw members' attention to a number of late representations received in respect of this application. As mentioned by the agent, the last speaker on this item, following publication of the agenda, we have received further consultation comments from the Environment Agency, and they've confirmed that, having reviewed the site levels, that the site lies far outside of flood zone 2, so they don't consider the development of the site to be vulnerable to flooding. So they have withdrawn their objection. So if members were minded to approve this application, reason for refusal number 3 is not something that they would need to consider in coming to that decision. We've also received late representations from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. They just confirmed that the comments they made in respect of the earlier application equally apply to this application. We've received comments from the Environmental Health Team. They have no objections in principle to the application, would like to understand the details of surface water drainage and provision for mains water and electricity. And finally, we've received late representations from the occupants of a nearby property objecting to the developments for a number of reasons, including size of pitches and noise and safety issues, amongst other considerations. Officers are also aware of correspondence that's been circulated to members in advance of the meeting, pointing to what are perceived as inaccuracies in the officer's report, and there's an officer response to that at item 5 of the late representation sheet. So addressing the item itself, members visited the site yesterday. They understood where the site sits in relation to the heritage asset engaged in this case, which is the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site. The site also occupies a site protected by a County Council tree preservation order, the trees surrounding the site that are protected by that order. The site comprises mainly hard surfacing where vegetation has grown through that, and members will have noted that from visiting the site. It's prominently located along the A6. Members were shown the position of the new access to serve the development. The new access would be sited to the east of the location of the current access. There would then be a main service road which will service what are indicated to be 8 permanent traveller pitches on this particular site. Members noted the size of those pitches and their general layout when visiting the site yesterday. By way of background, some members in this room will recall a decision that was made in June of last year at Planning Committee, where essentially an application for the same development was considered and refused for the same reasons that are presented to members this evening. Of those reasons that are still pertinent and relevant in respect of this consideration of this item before you this evening, they focus on the sustainability of location and also the impact on the designated heritage assets. In terms of the comments that have been made on the sustainability of location, you'll note in the officer's report that there is reference to a previous appeal decision and inspectors' findings on the sustainability of this site as a permanent traveller site. And there was recognition that whilst there was access to public transport, that the nearest settlement of Cromford, which is some 3 kilometres away, was such that the inspector felt that the majority of trips from the site would be made by car. Now we do have an up-to-date development plan, which includes specific provisions in relation to gypsy and traveller sites in the context of maintaining a 5-year supply of sites. And that sets a series of criteria upon which we assess such applications, one of which being the site is situated in a sustainable location in terms of local amenities and services, and that includes schools, shops, health services, employment opportunities, to allow access by sustainable means. I think members in considering this application need to think about the location of the site, proximity to the nearest settlement, which is Cromford, and the facilities and services that can offer. For some of those facilities that are listed in the policy and the development plan, you'd have to go further afield, and you're talking 7 kilometres to Wirksworth and a similar distance towards Matlock and the range of service and facilities that you can access from those locations. I'm happy to take questions at this stage.
First of all, Councillor Nick Whitehead, please.
Thanks, Chair. So, yeah, Chris, I kind of, sorry to be in disagreement with you so much tonight, but I can't really understand these sort of kind of recommendations for kind of rejecting the policy. So the first one, which you kind of talks about kind of the position of where it is in kind of the kind of World Heritage Site, I'm a little bit puzzled because, like, just down the road, we've got a very high, like a very posh version of caravans that have been established by Wat Stanwell. And there's a lot more than 8 of them, and they are in a flood zone because they're lower down. And I'm a bit puzzled. Why are we okay to pass planning permission for those sort of developments? But when it comes to a traveller's site, we use this as a reason for rejection. Doesn't seem right to me, that. And then secondly, we talk about the kind of the distance that we have to travel. One, it is on the bus route of the 6.1, which will take it to Belper in 22 minutes and back the other way to Cromford in about 10 minutes. So it's also not that far away from Wat Stanwell train station. I think it's quite well served as a location. My son travels to Wirksworth School. This is exactly the same distance that he has to travel as my son has to travel from a different part. So I'm a little bit flabbergasted that we're using these as reasons to turn down this application. I just wonder if you can give me a bit more context and a bit more background about your rationale.
Chris?
Yes, unfortunately I can't give you detailed planning history of the adjacent site. We are close to the administrative boundary with Amber Valley Borough Council, and I think it will be a neighbouring authority decision that was made. It could be a historic development. They will. I mean, in terms of their assessment of the application and the impacts, on the vulnerability of that land use and development to flooding would be a consideration for them. It may be a historic legacy site. It might even predate planning records. We don't know. I don't have that information, unfortunately. We have to assess each application on its merits, and this development in its own right has an impact on a heritage asset. We can't disregard that. We have to have regard to the impact on that heritage asset.
The rationale of what damage is it actually doing?
So understanding the significance, if you like, of the heritage asset, what we're dealing with is industrial development in a rural landscape. So in that particular context, rural development, agricultural related development is something you'd expect to see in that landscape. This is a site prominently positioned adjacent to the A6. You wouldn't expect to see this type of development hard up against the A6 on what was a turnpike road and part of the character, if you like, of that World Heritage Site.
While I completely accept that the kind of the development that I've referenced, which might be under Amber Valley, that's the bit that doesn't stack up because it's literally 2 minutes away. And so how can it be right for them and not right for this? It just and I do understand your rationale about taking each case on its merit, but I think we can have a wider view that if it's acceptable 2 minutes down the road, then it should be acceptable here.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's dangerous territory in that you have to assess the application on its merits in accordance with development plan policies at that time. That's what we're legally obliged to do. I think if you were to deviate from that, you're at risk of making an unreasonable and unsound planning decision.
Thank you for all those questions. We've got a long list. It's Councillor Wakeman, Councillor Roger Shelley, Councillor Dobbs, Councillor Neil Buckle, Sue, and then Councillor O'Brien. So, Mark, if you'd fire away your question, please.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go against the officer on this one. These travellers need a site. We've got a site here that's good enough for them. Are they going to pass away before they get a site? They need a site. And this, tonight, I think answers all the questions.
Right, thank you. We'll move to Councillor Shelley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, these are questions as much as anything else. So, I mean, I've looked at things like the design and access statement, and to me, it looks very thin. Like many of the other members here tonight, I think I might be sympathetic to this, but if we were to pass this, and I'm sort of testing the officers here, how far have we actually explored with the applicants details of things like the ablution and amenity block, the access and visibility display, the potential fencing, and the land conditions, which I understand are a matter of some concern. even though the flood risk may have been relieved. My final other question is that I understand from the correspondence that the developers are offering to lease the site back to the council were it to be approved tonight, but that's got no legal standing with us. We can't enforce that as a condition, can we?
There are a number of pertinent questions there. Addressing the first in terms of engagement with the applicant, I think members have got to understand that this has come forward as a private venture. This application has been submitted to the authority for consideration. Whilst the site may be offered up to the authority for consideration as to whether it would deliver the site as a Gypsy and Traveller site, I think it's very unlikely, in my opinion, having regard to the Designing Gypsy and Traveller Sites Good Practice Guide, that the development would come forward in the manner that's shown in this application. The pictures are relatively small, there's no amenity buildings, and in my view, it'd be a completely different application that would be presented to the authority for consideration. However, we have the application before us. It has come forward by the applicant and the landowner, and we have to consider it on its merits. But I think whether we take it forward as a local authority, that's a corporate decision and not a planning decision. We should be making our judgment based on the merits of this particular application. I'm going to have to try and remember your other questions. I mean, they're quite... I think you raised concerns about, or a question about the suitability of the site and ground conditions, from memory. I think...
Yes, it was to do with the land conditions, because my understanding is there's still some further investigations which are pending on that. So, there is a question then in my mind about whether this is a presumptuous, this application, until we've got that evidence. So there's that. There's the fencing and the access and visibility display, and then that point about whether we could actually enforce tying a granting of planning permission to leasing this site back to the council.
Yeah, so dealing with the latter part first, no, we can't. What we can do is we can assess this application on its merits, and granting planning permission, whether or not the site ultimately comes forward is a matter for the landowner in terms of whether they want to deliver the site as a Gypsy and Traveller site, or whether as a council we would want to take on any lease arrangement or option to purchase the site. But that's a separate decision and sits outside of the scope of this committee and the planning decision that we make. In terms of the land conditions, I mean, in taking the site forward, you've got to think about services that may need to be provided on site, the condition of the land, is it capable of accommodating all the weight from the caravans and additional facilities that you need on site? All those ground investigation works will need to be undertaken to inform any decision to potentially redevelop the site, and then it becomes a commercial decision for whoever wishes to take on that venture.
Councillor Peter Dobb.
But we could impose those as conditions, couldn't we, if we pass it tonight?
Well, in granting planning permission, you're giving permission for the use. Yes. So you're assuming that use will come forward, and that's a commercial decision that sits outside of the scope of this application. Whether or not it's a viable proposition is a matter for the landowner.
Councillor Peter Dobbs, please.
Thank you. Actually, following from Councillor Shelley's comments, does that mean that if it wasn't possible to develop for 8, it could be developed for 6, and that wouldn't, and we could still pass it tonight, and subsequently it could be for a smaller number, because that's the way it would fit with the conditions that would be pertinent to such an operation?
I think we need to separate out decision made in respect to this application, any future decision that council may make if it was to consider delivering a Gypsy and Traveller site on this particular site. I think if members were happy that in principle this amount of development, this type of development was acceptable, that's an acceptable decision to make, provided you're happy that there's either no harm to the heritage asset or there's less than substantial harm that would be outweighed by the public benefits to be derived, and you're happy that the location is a sustainable one in the round, then that's a matter, again, we keep saying it's a matter of judgment, and it's a decision that it's within your powers to make. But I think it's dangerous to assume that the development will come forward in any other form by whether it's the council or any other individual.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And to the question I was going to ask, to what extent does the Grove Lane appeal alter the way that we might interpret development in the countryside, sustainable development in the countryside, because they pointed then to the kind of sporadic development along Grove Lane to accept that the traveller site there was sustainable development in the countryside.
Yes, that's a valid point. There was the reference or the assessment of whether this site was isolated, and I think the inspector in that case had regards, buildings and groups of buildings in that location, didn't consider it to be isolated. They also had regard to the needs of the children of the occupants of that particular site who attended local schools, and that carried some weight as well. Here we're dealing with a different scale of development, and also it isn't a site where there is current occupation on site, so those needs aren't necessarily the same as they were or as acute in the Grove Lane appeal.
Councillor Buckle.
Thank you. Couple of questions. Well, I'll start off with the first question, and then the other one might be just a bit of a riff on the cyclic nature of history. How much land do we need per pitch? Is that much land available on that site? I noticed one of the objectors was talking about 325 square metres per pitch, right? And we're supposedly going to find space for 8 of those. I don't know whether or not the objectors were right or not. I'm not really an expert on gypsy pitches. I was just wondering, is it going to work?
It's a matter for members to consider. I think it's important to separate, what would be a desirable pitch size, to satisfy the local authority if it was to bring forward a site, or anyone else, in regard to the Designing Gypsy and Traveller Sites Good Practice Guide. The figure referenced in the representations received relates to a figure that's within the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment. It's not a figure that's cited in any of our policies. We don't have a maximum or a minimum size of pitch. What we have is an application here for 8 pitches of a particular size, and we need to consider that, the appropriateness of the application before us.
Yeah, so that's something for later then, isn't it, really, whether or not they manage to fit them in there if we give them planning permission.
So the brief second question, Neil.
Very briefly, it's like if it just sort of, like Cromford was built to provide housing for workers. Presumably we had itinerant workers all over the place in the Derwent Valley Mill site when these mills were being built. So that must have been the way the landscape was, the history of the place, which we are protecting, which is part of our heritage. So I'm a bit dubious about the statement about the objection to a few caravans on the side of the A6. But, that'll come to the vote.
Thank you, Neil. So, Councillor Burfoot, please. Then it's Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Slack. Please remember these are questions.
Yeah, sorry, me again. Following on from what Councillor Shelley said, what surprised me when I looked at this application was why there's such a lack of the details on the site plan. So it almost seems as if it's more of an outline application for the use of the site. I mean, just following on from what Councillor Shelley mentioned, we don't seem to have anything on the plan for the ablution or amenity block. There don't seem to be any details about the proposed boundary wall or the trespass-proof fence that I think is required by Network Rail. There are various things, and I just wondered why this is. Why is it lacking in detail?
Chris?
It comes back to whether or not pitches or this development needs to comply with Good Practice Guide. The application that's before us is for provision of pitches and pitches alone. It doesn't propose amenity buildings or any other associated infrastructure. So we have to assess it on that basis. If the application, if members were minded to approve the application, we'd need to think about controls in relation to some of the matters that you've raised. So first of all, we need to think about occupancy of the site, so that people occupying the pitches are persons that are defined within Annex 1 of the National Planning Policy Framework in relation to the definition of gypsies and travellers. Prior to first occupation of the pitches, details of the management and eligibility criteria to reside on the pitches to meet needs that, or the needs of gypsies and travellers who have a connection to the Derbyshire Dales area. Control the maximum number of pitches, some of the activities undertaken, boundary features and trespass-proof fence in relation to the boundary with the railway line. So they're all things that we could control by condition.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, I want to press you on the questions originally raised by Councillor Buttle. Yes, good practice. He's right, isn't he, that good practice suggests a pitch size should be somewhere between 300 and 500 square metres. And there is a question of separation distance for fire safety between pitches. And if I'm right, the pitch size proposed here is less than 70 square metres. Now, I'm right also, aren't I, that we spend a lot of time criticising housing developers for proposing housing development with very small bedrooms and living areas. If we were minded to approve this application with those those pitch specifications, would you think that would be a good decision?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. I think referring directly to the good practice guide, there's no specific reference to a minimum or maximum size of pitch. What it says, I think we'd all accept that this would come under the category of smaller pitches. So that smaller pitches must be able to accommodate at least an amenity building, a large trailer, drying space for clothes and parking for at least one vehicle, with parking being a minimum of 2.4 metres by 4.8 metres. I think we're right on the margins of meeting that based on the pitch sizes here. And like I said earlier on in the debate, sorry, it was questions on at the moment, questions that I think if this site was to come forward as a gypsy and traveller site, I'm not sure whether it would come forward in the form that's currently presented. It may be that there's a reduction in number of pitches and there's also other associated infrastructure delivered.
If you can answer my question directly, if we're approved for 8, do you think that would be a good decision by this council?
I think we're right on the margins in terms of meeting the requirements of the smaller pitches within the design guide, but it is just a guide, it's not policy.
I'd like to conclude the question time with Councillor Slack and then actually move into the debate.
I'm fair, put my hand up for debate, David.
Right, thank you. Are there any further questions from members, please? In that case, then, we'll open for debate. Is there, Peter, you're the ward member, so please perhaps start there.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we visited this site yesterday and I was quite surprised because previously when I visited this site it was more open, but now the vegetation, trees have grown up. It's a more enclosed site now than what it used to be. And it's and the people told us that there were services on site, electric and services on site, and they also said that fencing would be put right round the site so it would be secure. So looking all in all, it's a much better site than what we turned down previously. Because we turned down it previously because we were concerned about road safety. A gentleman getting on the road and getting knocked down. But now, if it's fenced right round and there's vegetation around the fencing, it's a good site. It's a better site. And I would be, I'm afraid I'd have to go against officer's recommendation again. In my opinion, it's a good site. And it's
Are you moving approval then, Councillor Slack, as ward member?
Thank
you. It's been moved. Does this find a seconder, please? Councillor Murphy. It's been moved and seconded. Yeah. But I'll let Chris in, but it has now been moved and seconded, so there is a motion on the floor. Chris.
Sorry to interject at this stage. I think I appreciate the motion that's on the table, but I just want to make sure that the motion is a sound one, just to clarify that the previous reasons for refusal are as reflected in the report that's before you this evening. Highway safety didn't figure as a reason for refusal in respect to the previous application. So I think if you
previously, yeah, before this one, yeah.
But I think if you just focus on the reasons why you feel this development is acceptable, and the motion should be based on those reasons.
Along your other recommendation, that World Heritage Site, it's an industrial heritage. It's not a building heritage. It's industrial heritage of Derwent Valley. So therefore, it's not really contrary to breaking that law, really. And also the flooding. Now the environment agents have judged it now to be safe. And, you know, where else do you want to go? I mean, it's answered all the questions, really.
Yes, please.
Yes, I think just trying to clarify your position there, Councillor. I think what you're saying is you don't feel, do you feel there's no harm to the heritage asset, or do you feel there's...
I do feel there's no harm to heritage, yeah.
And you feel that the location is a sustainable one,
it's
and
sustainable
therefore...
because it's enclosed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Murphy as seconder.
Okay, yes. I visited this site for the first time yesterday, and I've driven past it a few times, and when I look at that site, and then I know it's not relevant, and then I look at the another site at Hasker Farm, which we were talking about, and we spent a lot of money on getting it to a certain stage. You can't compare the two. I think the communications, the potential for this site to be fully enclosed, it's got water, electricity on site. I think it won't. I can't see how it's going to affect the heritage asset at Massey Mill and other areas. I think we've got an opportunity here. I think we're almost looking for reasons to sort of, and they might be valid, but you know, we don't have many sites like this come up. I'm sure Paul Wilson has been asking for years for people to bring sites forward and whatever, and we've got one here that ticks a lot of boxes for me. I'm sure there is issues, but it is not beyond the wit of man to overcome those. I listened to Dr. Spencer, and it's time really to create potential that we have a site for these travellers. Now, the commerce might not work out, you know, the negotiations between us and the owners and whatever, but I believe we should be offering, you know, support for this application. So I would ask fellow members to consider that. Thank you.
Members, can we put this to the vote, please? You know, we've had, I think, you know, you'd like to clarify the conditions.
If we can just clarify that if members are minded to approve this application, it's with conditions and what those conditions are, just so we're absolutely clear.
Who wishes to speak? Right. Sorry, before we do that, Councillor Shelley, apparently you wish to speak.
No, it's precisely those points. We need to be clear what those conditions are. I mean, I think we've heard some of those, but Chris, are you able to summarise our concerns there and how we could build those into the motion, please?
I can do this succinctly because I've prepared a statement of case on the council's behalf in respect of the appeal for the same development, in which we have to specify conditions. So what I'd suggest is that the conditions recommended in that or put forward in that statement of case have applied to this decision this evening. I can tell you what they are if you like, but there's...
I like your thinking here. It's very in the style of our previous Prime Minister, I think, when he presented a case for two sides for something a little larger.
Okay then, members, it's been moved and seconded that we grant approval. All those in favour, please show. Against? One against. Any abstentions, please? The application has then been approved. Can we take, just for 5 or 6 minutes, a break now, please? And then we'll return to the meeting.
Well, to know.
Sorry, it's just one of those
Overturned
nights.
3.
We're in charge.
Well, I think, and also I think isn't this, it's almost the sort of actually the
Well,
change of
internally,
focus as a council.
let you know.
I think, and also I think isn't this, it's almost the sort of actually the change of focus as a council.
Let you know. Please. The next item to be determined is the application on page 67 of your planning and agenda, outline planning application for a mixed-use development of up to 75 numbered dwelling houses and commercial development use class E, with approval being sought for accessed revised scheme. This is land off Belper Road, Ashbourne, and we have certainly 2, 3 people wishing to speak. So, first of all, does the officer wish initially to say anything? It's sorry, sorry. I do apologise. Main Road, Brailsford. Yeah. I've got myself muddled up. It's page 67. I'm just looking for, trying to locate the actual list of speakers. That one, sorry, yeah. I do apologise for that. So if we could first commence with Councillor John White, who is Brailsford and Enderston Parish Council. John, if you'd like to come and speak, you've got 2 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name's John White, and as you've heard, I'm a parish councillor. I'm also a resident of Brailsford, and I appreciate you've had a long evening this evening, so I'll be as brief and succinct as I possibly can be. We'd like to thank the officers for their work in examining the application and agree with their concerns regarding the impact on the conservation area, the scale of the proposed development, and compliance with the adopted Derbyshire Dales local plan, adopted Brailsford Parish Neighbourhood Plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. We wholeheartedly support the recommendation to refuse. We do not agree that the site access and pedestrian access is safe for a site at this location. On the brow of a hill with limited visibility in both directions, traffic from the west turning into the site across the path of oncoming traffic leading to tailbacks, and heavy peak traffic flows with a high proportion of HGVs. We're very concerned that we could be engineering a fatality here. We believe that highways safety should be added as a reason for refusal. We will be producing our own traffic study, transport study, as part of the preparations for the next neighbourhood plan, and will pay particular attention to pedestrian safety, road traffic safety, and connectivity throughout the village. To avoid the situation where new developments are cut off from the village and all its facilities, and we want to promote social cohesion and encourage the limited use of cars by residents within the village for short trips. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. And the next speaker is Elizabeth Tarling, who is a local resident, who I think we met on the site visit yesterday. And Elizabeth, you've got 2 minutes.
Hi, good evening. Yes, my name is Elizabeth Tarling. I'm a resident of Brailsford. I do live adjacent to the proposed site. I really want to just make the point that Brailsford is a village. It was designated in the Derbyshire Dales local plan settlement hierarchy as Tier 3 settlement, which allowed for 114 additional homes. Since 2014, a total of new houses within this large-scale developments is 191 already. Between 2011 and 2021, the population has increased by 67%, which is an additional 815 residents. It has been a rural community for centuries, and everyone who lives there now, all the residents appreciate living there precisely because it is surrounded by fields and open countryside. It is however, rapidly losing its individuality and character, and is becoming increasingly urbanised as more large-scale generic housing developments are built. Native hedgerows and trees will be lost, and the long views to the southwest interrupted. Footpaths becoming pavements, tracks becoming roads. The inevitable increase of street lighting will lead to light pollution, and this will be detrimental to the local tawny owls and bats and badgers. By way of illustration, how the village is changing, your site visit yesterday, where you parked the minibus on Bolehill Road in 2015, the Brailsford ploughing match was held on those fields where there are now 75 houses. The proposed site is across the A52 from where you parked and is adjacent to the conservation area, and where the farmhouses back onto the fields, any development would impact the historic identity of the medieval village. And there are also considerations of the archaeological significance of the area. The west of the site down the hill is the ancient church of All Saints, where the Anglo-Saxon cross in the churchyard is dated to about AD 870. It's rare to have a church standing so remote from the village it serves, and it's highly probable the original settlement clustered more around the church, which means the very oldest parts of Brailsford village are likely to be under the field proposed for development.
Elizabeth, unfortunately, I have to interject.
Yeah.
I've let you go over time, but
Thank you.
it is, yeah.
Thank you. Fundamentally, we don't want to expand. Thank you.
And finally, the agent, Mr. Andrew Stock. Andrew, if perhaps you would address us now, and you've got 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. I note with disappointment the case officer's 2 reasons for refusal. The reasons for refusal relate to the perceived harm to Brailsford Conservation Area, several listed buildings located approximately 80 metres away from the application site, the scale of development and its potential harm to the character and appearance of the area. It's first worth noting that its application is for a scheme of 75 dwelling houses, reduced down from 100 houses previously, with a small commercial element more importantly contained within a much smaller developable area. The area is less than half that of the previous application and will be physically detached from Brailsford Conservation Area itself. The 2 reasons for refusal are therefore not substantiated in our professional opinion. There is no discernible impact on the conservation area or landscape, as development will sit comfortably against existing built development to the east and to the north of the site. It would also appear that the public benefits of the development have also been overlooked by the officers in their assessment of the revised scheme. In social terms, the development will contribute towards meeting the District Council's much needed housing, open market and affordable housing contributions. In economic terms, the benefits include land retained for employment use, new and improved public rights of way, employment generated during construction, council tax payments and benefits to businesses in the area already. In environmental terms, the development will achieve a biodiversity net gain across the entire site, incorporate new open space and a sustainable urban drainage system. A £355,000 contribution towards the provision of 8 infant and 10 junior places at Brailsford Primary School will also be provided. A £67,000 contribution towards local medical practice will also be secured by a Section 106 agreement. Officers fully acknowledge that the District Council is unable to demonstrate a deliverable 5-year housing land supply position. However, there appears to be a lack of lateral thinking on how best to resolve this matter. A number of the allocated quarry sites are not coming forward, and the larger allocations, such as Gritstone Road in Matlock, have stalled with no realistic prospect of coming forward. This will likely lead to further pressure on less suitable and less sites coming at a later stage. As set out in detail within the company's supporting documents and the recent comments made by the planning policy team at Derbyshire County Council, there is clear policy support for new build development on the edge of 30 settlements within the district, with only Matlock, Ashbourne, Wirksworth and Darley being classified as a more sustainable location than Brailsford. Brailsford is therefore recognised as an important geographical area within the district for growth, with no clear distinction between the northern, eastern, southern or western parts of the settlement, for which growth should be encouraged. Members who visited the site yesterday would have noticed the successfully completed development homes to the north of the site. This development has extended the village further west and is clearly visible from the site, the A52 and the public footpaths within the area. Overall, we do not believe that the scheme in its revised form will materially impact the significance of nearby listed buildings, the conservation area and the landscape impact will be minimal and outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme. It is respectfully requested that members give full weight to the aforementioned material planning considerations this evening when they make their decision. Just to touch on the latest parish council comments and the improvements to pedestrian safety, the applicants are fully committed to improving that. We had originally proposed a right-hand turn central lane, pedestrian crossing with a central refuse island, relocation of the 30-mile-an-hour markings 30 metres west of the site already, enhanced gateway features, and the inclusion of a pedestrian railings along the entire footpath into Brailsford. If members are minded to approve the application this evening, we will be open to conditions of that matter. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for the comments from the agent. Any final comments before we go into questions? Yep, that's fine, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
Just got some late reps to just quickly go through, and then we can go straight into questions. We've got a consultation response from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, which was covered in the report because the last application we had a response and the issues are similar in that respect. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust haven't raised any objections but recommend conditions in the event that permission is granted. The agent has submitted some visuals of the development, which are noted, and one additional representation has been received, mainly in regard to transport highway safety issues, which are set out, and the officer response is set out as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Members, we need to just have a motion to extend and continue the planning meeting if that's desired, or we can pack up and go. So what? Will someone move an extend? Thank you. It's universally moved, and we'll just plough on, shall we? Right. Yeah. Questions? Any questions? Because I mean, it was a very useful site visit we had yesterday. Councillor Franks.
Just would like to pick up on the archaeological element. Has there been any research, given the fact that right on the corner of the far side of this site, there is this Saxon church dating back hundreds of years at some distance to the rest of the settlement. So this area, I agree, probably was the settlement originally, and I would envisage that if it was, that there should be some investigation into the archaeological significance of this site, and some has anything been done about that?
Yes, we've consulted the county archaeologist on the application, and they've looked at the development. They agree that there is potential for archaeological interest and significance, but based upon their understanding of the site and surroundings, they recommend an archaeological assessment is required, but that could be secured by planning condition rather than being needed before we determine the application.
Can we then move, members? Because I think it's pretty straight. Well, I hope it's pretty straightforward. Councillor Shelley.
Just a really, really quick question, unless I've missed something. There is, within this, also a proposal for a commercial development. Do we have any idea what nature that would take?
Yes, well, the commercial element is defined as being within use class E, and that covers a range of uses, including shops, offices, research and development, light industry, but it is a use which would be acceptable in a residential area, so it wouldn't be a general industrial use, so it wouldn't be particularly noisy or smelly.
And what proportion of the site would be allocated to that?
Not sure on the exact proportion, but the plan is for 0.17 hectares, so 1,700 square metres of land for that use.
I should just say, as members saw yesterday, this is a very precious area of open countryside. Certainly where the oak tree is, by allowing a development there, it's certainly going to have a very significant impact, and you're not going to be exactly walking on a country footpath. But perhaps I'm going too far as chair in even saying that, but members, please. Councillor Buckle.
Am I still allowed questions, or do I have to debate?
Ask a question, fire away.
No, right,
Yep.
great, thank you. If we allow building on both sides of the A52, we move the village so that it's got a main road running through it. do we have a policy that that addresses that particular issue about us moving the centre of the village to straddle the main road?
We don't have a particular policy about roads per se. We do have policies that require development to respect the character of settlements. And here in Brailsford, there's definitely a distinct change in character between the north side of the road and the south side of the road, in my view. The southern side is more open and more historic. That's obviously where the conservation areas and listed buildings are. The northern areas had a lot more recent developments. So the impact of the development should be assessed in the context of the character of Brailsford, and obviously different settlements and their settlement patterns in relation to roads will vary. But it's not unusual for roads to go through the centre of settlements. So I think I would focus more on the character of Brailsford and what the impact is here.
Anyone like to move a motion then now so that we, Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to move officer recommendation on this one. I do agree with the speakers as well. It is going to create highways issues and safety issues as well. So I'll move officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Councillor Slack.
Second that, Chair. It's not only about the heritage side of it, it's a very dangerous place for children to come across them roads. The traffic down there is horrendous, and there's no proper crossing areas. So I agree with the officers entirely.
Councillor O'Brien.
I fully support the officer recommendation to refuse. I do, however, have some concern about the reasons given for refusal and their robustness, particularly reason one, basically because it's an outline application, so I think it could be quite difficult to evidence how, in outline form, the development could be detrimental to the conservation area. But I do think the point made by the parish council is quite relevant, and notwithstanding the ambivalence of the views of the county council, I do think that buildings 75 dwellings here, to say that alongside the A52, to say that that is perfectly safe for the families that are going to be living there, the pedestrians that are going to be travelling in and out, walking in and out of the village, to say that is perfectly safe, I think is something, well, to say it's misjudgment is being generous on the county council. So I would like to suggest that we add an additional reason for refusal relating to aspects of highway safety suitably phrased, with the agreement of the proposer and seconder.
Are you happy, Councillor Lees, with that?
More than happy with that, Chair.
Good. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lees. And the seconder,
Same, I'm more than happy with that. Yeah.
Right, members, if we can put that to the vote, though, the motion is for refusal. Those in favour, please show. And that does appear to be unanimous. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, it was unanimous. Thank you. So we turn then now to pages 97, where I got muddled up a bit back. And it's the outline planning application for the erection of 25 dwelling houses, with approval being sought for access at land off Belper Road, Ashbourne. I'll ask perhaps Adam if you kindly just introduce this, and then as we've been doing tonight, we'll simply take questions. Oh, sorry, speakers, yeah. Adam, if you...
I'll just do, there are some late reps before speakers, which is just one from the agent who has questioned how impact upon landscape impact has been assessed, and there is an officer response there pointing out the relevant sections of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll invite then the speakers. We've got three. The first is a local resident, Mr. Philip Robinson. And Philip, you've got 2 minutes, please.
My name is Philip Robinson, and I and my family live at 91 Belper Road, so we are direct next door neighbours to the proposed housing estate. We strongly object to the proposal. The real issue here is the proposed housing estate is in a completely inappropriate location for a development of this type. Housing estates affect current and future generations living or visiting the area, so need to be as minimally intrusive and visible to the local environment and community as possible. As a historic market town with strong tourism links, Ashbourne should be attractive, welcoming and indicative of the town's heritage. The proposed incongruous housing estate would blight the A517 gateway into and out of Ashbourne from Belper. Not only that, it would considerably extend the perceived town boundary to the hamlet of Sturston, and Sturston would effectively become a ribbon development of Ashbourne. It's not a great location either because it impacts the enjoyment of the adjacent Grade 2 listed building, Gate Farm. It is on the site of archaeological interest. It interferes with the enjoyment of the ancient Shrovetide ball game. It will be a carbuncle on the landscape, especially when viewed from Henmore Brook. It increases road traffic and accident risk. Ask anybody living locally, not statistically dubious desk-based calculations. It damages the natural environment and habitat for wildlife. It is very close to Sturston primary electrical substation with associated noise, work traffic, but most importantly, the human health risk associated with the emission of electric and magnetic fields, EMFs. It is outside the Ashbourne settlement boundary, and as virgin farmland was acquired at a value associated with farmland, not at brownfield land cost, within the boundary, which would be far more preferable to develop. However, perhaps the most compelling acknowledgement that this housing estate is not in a fit urban location is the admission by the developer that he has felt compelled to try and camouflage buildings as a pseudo farmyard. I'm only surprised that there are parking provisions for cars and not for tractors.
Philip, unfortunately, I've allowed you overtime.
Okay.
Do you want to just quickly?
Okay. I just think it's location. The community, the heritage and wildlife, and Ashbourne generally will not benefit from this development. And I strongly urge the council to object this application.
Thank you very much. And another local resident, Mr. Mark Gorman. And again, Mark, you've got 2 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, my name's Mark Gorman. I live in 89 Belper Road. I'm a neighbour of Phil's, and thank you for your time this evening. So you've heard a number of objections from Phil, and I fully endorse his position on this. Specifically, I'm personally concerned about traffic safety relating to the development stroke proposal. It is not uncommon to hear and see excessive speeds outside my house, outside Phil's house. We reside together in one plot. Excessive speeds, both coming towards Ashbourne, but also going out along the Belper Road. I'm concerned that this development will lead to a volumetric change in the traffic flows and a resultant increase in the incidence of traffic-related accidents. There have been a number of accidents in recent years, many of which are small and unreported. And my concern is that if you look over an even longer period, say 20 years, there are significant accidents in that space, and this will make it worse. So the development increases the risk of accidents becoming reality. I strongly recommend that you reject this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the final speaker is the agent, Mr. Richard Piggott. Richard, you've got 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to speak this evening. The social and economic benefits of new build housing are often referenced, But what does this actually mean in practice? Well, maybe I can shed some light on that from a personal perspective. My wife and I moved to Ashbourne from outside the area in 2015, in no small part because we found an attractive new build housing estate to move to. Had this not been the case, we may never have moved to Ashbourne. Since then, we've been blessed with 2 children who attend a local school and nursery, and we collectively call Ashbourne our home. We love the town and don't envisage leaving because it's a great place to live, with friendly, welcoming people, a rich history, and a fantastic setting on the edge of the Peak Park. Who knows, I may even get involved in Shrovetide one of these days. We pay council tax, spend money in the shops, spend hours in the leisure centre, play our part in the local community, and hopefully contribute to the overall vitality of the town. Approving this application would result in 25 brand new homes, many of them attracting new families to the town. Furthermore, 7 of these homes will be affordable, helping to meet the shortage of high-quality, affordable homes in the district. Remember, Ashbourne is a Tier 1 settlement, meaning there is no better place to locate new homes in the district. The site provides easy access into the town on foot or bicycle via the pavement on Belper Road or the public footpath running along the northern boundary which links to the Park Estate. The development will be unashamedly green, retaining all important habitats on the site and delivering a biodiversity net gain in excess of 10%. This is welcomed by Derbyshire Wildlife Trust as it goes above and beyond the current requirements. The houses will incorporate the latest technology designed to be highly energy efficient with solar panels and battery storage, air source heat pumps and EV charging points. This will not only reduce energy and utility bills, but help to mitigate the impact of the development upon climate change. There is also space for the site to provide allotments should the community want it. We have worked tirelessly to design a scheme which respects the rural setting of Gate Farmhouse and will provide a fitting eastern edge to the town. We have gone above and beyond the level of detail usually provided for an outline application because we are keen to ensure that this is a high quality development, not least because the applicant lives within a stone's throw of the site. The development is purposely low density and we are committed to retaining the open spaces around the southern and eastern edges of the site in order to ensure an attractive form of development with a soft edge. The built form and landscape parameters set out in the application can be secured by planning condition, meaning any subsequent reserved matter submission will be required to strictly accord with these parameters that are set out in the application. Should, however, you feel that further information would be beneficial to your considerations, I would request that the application be deferred to allow time for this to be submitted. For all of the above reasons, I ask you to recognise the opportunity provided by this site to deliver an exemplar form of development at the eastern gateway to the town and contribute to the vitality and vibrancy of Ashbourne. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So, members, it's open now for questions. We visited the site yesterday. So does anyone specifically want to ask the officer any relevant question at this point? Or can we move into a debate? Peter, Councillor Dodds.
Very quickly, Chair. The agent has just mentioned certain features, but this is an outline application, so we are not tied to those things he's just mentioned. They could disappear when it comes to reserved matters. Is that correct?
Potentially, it depends what decision was made. The agent indicated planning conditions, and it is possible to put planning conditions on, for example, to require the development to be undertaken in the developable area indicated on the, because that's just an indicative plan. You're right to say that that plan in itself, although it is only an indication of how development could be delivered, reserved matters ultimately would detail a layout and scale and external appearance, but planning conditions could be imposed to require certain elements of the submission to be carried through to reserved matters, yes, but the exact detail of how it would be delivered would be a matter for a separate application.
Councillor Lilliers.
Just a question from what the follow on from the speakers. Do you class this as an estate or a cul-de-sac?
Adam?
technically both, I suppose. But as I say, the precise layout and form would be subject to reserved matters.
Councillor Neil Buckle.
Hi there. I think this is probably for Chris. Mr. Piggott, the agent, just mentioned adding a soft edge to Ashbourne. I found that quite an attractive idea for some bizarre reason. I like the idea of not coming up a wall of housing or what have you. Do we actually have a policy about adding soft edges, preferring soft edges, or do we just stick a big field in it and fill it full of houses?
Just addressing that point, Councillor Buckle. As an authority, we try and ensure that development respects the character, identity and context of settlements. We are settlement fringe here. There is a clear transition between built development and countryside. But what the developer has offered and what the agent has offered up here is some design principles that try and respect that transition. So you've got a form of development that, I suppose, with the scale and nature of it, is unusual in that if it was a volume house builder, you'd tend to find standard building types and products that are delivered and rolled out on sites nationally, whereas here you've got a bespoke development and some design principles that set parameters for how this site could be brought forward to respond more positively to context.
Calder.
Just ask a question about the yellow lines on the outline drawing. Are they all essentially accessible by footpath and not actually, not a proposal to provide parking outside each individual house?
Yeah, those yellow lines are footpaths. I believe the parking areas are indicated sort of to the rear of all the dwellings. So they'll be not visible from outside the site.
So the ones that are sort of in the southwest corner, where is the parking associated with those?
So if you see when the road bends round, and then there's sort of some yellow areas jutting out from the backs of those houses, that's where it's indicated that the parking areas would be for those dwellings.
Okay, thank you.
We've got the two ward members with us. Do either of you wish at this point to Councillor Lees?
Oh, in debate, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the agent and the applicant has gone a long way here to provide a site for which he could have applied for a lot more dwellings. And I think I hear what the speakers have said, but I do feel it is a considerable distance from their house to be acceptable. I don't think the listed building has got a lot of merits in it from where it's situated to as regards towards the development, due to the fact that, as it's been mentioned, there's a substation probably closer to the listed building than what is the development that's proposed. For those of you that didn't notice yesterday on the site visit, I've been around Ashbourne all my life, and for those that didn't notice, there was historically a house actually on that site in the corner. There was a floor slab you could still see in the corner of that piece of land before you go down Mill Lane, which was a dwelling. So it's not, if that dwelling was still there, it would probably be classed as infill, in my opinion. So I think the houses are very well laid out. We're in a situation here, we're going to have 7 affordable houses within the build. The applicant has stated, the agent stated, that he's going to provide basically everything we've been asking for on previous applications throughout the last don't know how many years, and we've got this opportunity to take this up, and we're going to get environmentally friendly houses, EV charging points, we've got footpaths that's going both sides of the development, either down the riverside into Ashbourne or around the roadside into Ashbourne. We've even got allotments that is prepared to put for availability to residents, which is a much needed part of the environment, in my opinion. Also, as a member of the Shrovetide Committee are aware of this application, and the comments, we haven't made a comment from the Shrovetide Committee because the game of Shrovetide goes where it goes, so it's no detriment to the game whatsoever. So on that grounds, Chair, I'd like to object to the application as it is and go for approval rather than...
Does Councillor Leeser's motion find a seconder at this point? Councillor Waitman, thank you. Councillor Peter Dobbs.
I'm afraid I'm going to propose the other way. How does that technically work?
You need to propose an amendment then.
But it will be contrary to this one.
Yes,
So
yes.
is that how it proceeds?
So, do we actually seek?
Just as a point of order, Chair, you can't, Chair, as a point of order, you can't propose an amendment which is the opposite of the proposal.
Right. Thank you, Peter. That is helpful. So, Peter, we will continue in debate and then test the feeling of the meeting, and maybe then you have to then produce a fresh motion.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I would like to make 2 points. Firstly, I'd like to speak in support of the Town Council's view on this, which doesn't like the location particularly, worries about the road safety, and does echo the officer's comments on how it would look. To be perfectly honest, we do have a very nice, soft introduction to Ashbourne along that road, and I don't think this would make it better. And so I support the officer recommendation. It's possibly a nice layout, but it's in the wrong place, and I couldn't emphasise more the road safety issues on that bit of road. Thank you.
Further comments, please, from members? Councillor O'Brien.
I support the officer's recommendation to Chair. I'm afraid I find the on 2 principal grounds. First of all, I think this is an inappropriate extension of Ashbourne. Officers have used professional language to describe that. To me, I would use the term sprawl, which I think would be more appropriate if it were built out. And certainly, I think the form of development which is suggested there, I think, is totally alien to the character of Ashbourne as a market town. So on both those grounds, I support the officer's recommendation.
Any further comments from members? If we could take we have a motion before that we approve this application. It's been moved by Councillor Lees, seconded by Councillor Mark Waitman.
Not to approve it.
Sorry?
Not to against approval. My motion was against officer's recommendation.
I thought
Yeah, I'm going against officer recommendation.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. Your motion is for approval.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Not for approval of the officer's recommendation.
No. Okay, Chris, Adam.
Yeah, just bearing in mind the implications in terms of affordable housing and contributions, I just want to quickly go through planning obligation and conditions in the event that members were minded to approve. So if members are minded to approve, we'd recommend prior entry into a planning obligation to secure the 30% affordable housing and half a unit financial contribution. Contributions for allotments off-site of £1,773 on the sites identified by the neighbourhoods manager, and a contribution for play areas off-site for £4,252.50 on sites identified by the neighbourhoods manager. Standard conditions set out statutory time for approval of reserve matters, on which reserve matters need to be approved. We would recommend a condition, given what members have said, that approve the developable area as shown on the indicative plan, with the scale, layout and external appearance closely reflecting the submitted development design parameters. Agree detailed design and management of surface water drainage recommended by the lead local flood authority. Approve assessment to demonstrate proposed destination for surface water in accordance with drainage hierarchy. Details of how additional surface water runoff will be avoided during construction. Verification report by a qualified drainage engineer to demonstrate the drainage system is constructed. Conditions and informatives recommended by the Highway Authority on the previous application, which they referred to in their comments on this one. Submission and approval of a travel plan. Submission of agricultural impact assessment method statement with any reserve matters application for landscaping. The recommended conditions by Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. The recommended condition by the county archaeologist. For a reserve matters application to provide for a housing mix in accordance with policy requirements. For the dwellings to incorporate measures to help mitigate the effects and adapt to climate change. And site construction hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Right, we'll test the feeling of the committee now, please. The motion that's been moved and seconded is that we grant approval for this planning application. All those in favour, please clearly show. Against? 4. Any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Therefore, the motion is carried and the application is approved. Thank you. You can turn then to pages 127, 152. Application for the demolition of a dwelling house, erection of 5 number dwelling houses with associated access and parking, the Gables, 14 Bolehill Road, Bolehill, Matlock. And again, we visited this site, which was very useful to see yesterday. And the case officer is Adam, please. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'll keep this brief, Chair. Members visited the site yesterday. They'll have noted that the site has a challenging topography. We're sited in Bolehill Conservation Area here. Settlement framework boundary. There's an extant permission for 7 dwellings on this site, where a lawful commencement has been made. This application proposes 5 dwellings. We're satisfied that the layout of development on the site is an acceptable one. The design of the dwellings is acceptable, and will respond positively to character, identity and context of this part of the settlement, hence why we're recommending approval of this application.
Councillor Slack.
A question, Chris. Question.
Yep, that's fine, Peter.
Yeah. Chris, can this be included in a Wordsworth neighbourhood plan as a principal residence?
Oh, sorry. I do apologise, Councillor Slack. I jumped the gun. There is a speaker pertaining the application who's going to speak in favour, and it's Jamie Jones. I do apologise, Mr. Jones. My fault. And Jamie, you've got 4 minutes. Oh, well.
I will keep this very brief. My name's Jamie Jones. I'm the Managing Director of Straw & Jones Limited, a small, local, family-owned building company. We are the recent owners of the Gables, 14 Bolehill Road, and took on the excellent 7-house permission that's on the site. First of all, thank you to the Chair and the committee members for listening to our representation and the planning officers for their hard work with us on the pre-app and subsequent full planning application. A high-level summary of the application to assist with determination is the proposed scheme will provide 5 excellent, high-quality, ecologically focused, forever family homes for primary occupation. Our scheme will redevelop an eyesore site that has been fallow for over a decade and remove a small, poor-quality, uninhabitable dwelling that does not fit in the local vernacular. The 2 house types included have been designed from the outset to be inherently energy efficient, but will also include or allow easy retrofit of solar panels, air source heat pumps, and electric vehicle chargers. The developed site will provide a biodiversity benefit to the area through introduction of new planting and mixed green roofs, as well as bird and bat roosts built into the houses. Full details to be confirmed with the planners as per the conditions. The proposed scheme is significantly improved over the previously granted and extant permission in all areas, but notably will require less heavy plant, regrading and materials to build, as it is making better use of the site's existing topology. Thank you for your time and patience. We look forward eagerly to your response.
Thank you very much. So it's now open. Councillor Slack.
Yeah, I apologise for that. I was jumping the gun a bit.
No, it was my fault, Peter, not yours.
Chris, in the works of neighbourhood plans is a principle, a primary residence act where all the new dwellings and change of use should be primary residence. It's been included in quite a number of applications in works of one of them's the cinema project. So can that be included in it? I notice you haven't got it in at the moment. It's not a big thing, but it galvanises what the democratically works for people have voted for.
Yeah, just to clarify on that point, Councillor Slack. So we've addressed that at part 7.4
Oh, I beg your pardon, yeah.
of the officer's report. So what we're saying is that policy MP5 of the neighbourhood plan does require that all new dwellings are subject to restriction to ensure the occupation is only as a principal residence home. However, in this particular case, there's an extant permission in place for 7 dwellings where no such restrictions apply, and therefore that's a material consideration in the consideration of this application. It's not considered reasonable to impose such a restriction in that context.
I beg to differ there because the others go back a long way. The neighbourhood plan was voted in probably 8 years ago, and it was in then, and it should have been adhered to previously.
Yeah,
so we really should be putting it in now, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because it's been democratically voted by the works of people, and it should be included.
We do appreciate that, and we do consistently apply the policy. The issue here is that we've got another material consideration at play in that there's an extant permission that could be built out for 7 houses on the site without any restrictions. So it's considered unreasonable. We don't consider that a condition would pass the test for conditions.
I beg to differ, and I think the works of people, and we'll beg to differ with you on that subject. It will have to be altered. That will definitely in the new local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slack. Any further questions? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. In the recommendations 3, sample of stone, render, etc. Are some of the houses built of stone, some of render, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, the plans
natural stone.
The plans indicate natural Derbyshire gritstone.
Yeah.
So the preference will be for locally sourced natural stone, and there is some larch boarding as well on some of the houses.
Yeah. Thank you.
And plain tiles.
Councillor Boothroyd, thank you.
I just have a question about the statement just made about including or allowing easy retrofit of air source heat pumps, solar panels and EV charging points. Are we able to put a condition that essentially easy retrofit is always going to be significantly more challenging than putting it in the first place, and therefore just put it in the first place?
If there isn't already, I'd suggest that we include a condition that a scheme for the measures to help mitigate the effects of adaptive climate change are submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, so that we can encourage as much as possible in respect of the development and enter into discussions with the applicant in terms of what that might involve. So I think at the very least, if there isn't a condition already there, that we include such a condition. Oh, okay, there is a condition, condition 3.
Any further questions? No. So, it's your ward, Peter. Do you want to move a motion at this point?
I will move it, Chair, but I was a little bit disappointed that it wasn't 7 dwellings for a reasonable houses for most people to purchase, but I won't go against it because it's an area what wants developed, but it's been a mess for quite a long time, and it needs straightening up. So I will move it, Chair.
But I will say from the chair, I support your view on that, Peter. Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely. And Councillor Lees has seconded it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll second this, and I do realise the challenges involved in building on a site like this. Why it is 5 and not 7. It's quite a challenging site, and I wish the applicant good luck on it. Thank you.
Members, it's been moved and seconded that this be approved. All those in favour, please show.
Chair.
And that appears to be...
Chair,
sorry.
I wanted to move an amendment.
Oh,
actually,
right,
Chair.
okay.
I want to move an amendment along the lines that of the question Councillor Slack asked. So I'd like to move an amendment that the application be approved with the addition of a condition relating to primary residency condition as in the Worksworth neighbour plan. I agree entirely with the officers that this is a material consideration, but that's all it is. It's a consideration. It's not the primary consideration. This is a new application for a new development. It's a new developer, a new owner. It's entirely new. So it's it is a material consideration, but as I said, it's not a primary consideration. This is a policy in the neighbourhood plan for a very good reason, which is to ensure that houses remain in occupation by local people. So I hope that we can see the rationale for including that condition in the approval. So I want to move that amendment, Chair.
Does the amendment find a second? Councillor Neil Buckle has seconded that. Do members wish to support then the amendment, please?
Yeah, as a mover of the, yeah, definitely. I did want to bring that in, but ruled out. But thank you, Peter, for bringing that back again. So I will definitely have that included, yeah.
Are you comfortable with that as seconder, Councillor Lees?
No.
Right.
Yes, in principle, yes. But can we have a time frame on it for, say, these properties don't sell in a certain time or to the local residents? Can that become open then to the general sales pitch? Or not?
No, as a point of information, Chair, this is not about this is about principal residence, so it can't be a second home.
Of the Worksworth people.
No, it can't be a second. Not a local occupancy. It has to be a permanent.
Not a second home.
Not a second home.
In that case, I'm okay.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. So taking into account the amendment, we'll now vote that is incorporated into the motion. So the motion is that we approve the application. All those in favour, please show. And that is, in fact, unanimous. Thank you, members. Yeah. Yes, Councillor Whitehead.
So I'll have to give apologies because my childminder is about to leave in 10 minutes. It takes me 10 minutes to get home, so I'll have to give apologies for the end of the meeting, if that's okay.
That is, and thank you for your presence tonight. Yeah. We turn then to application found on pages 153 to 176, extension to existing workshop and erection of replacement store building, creation of private way hard surfacing and landscaping in association with change of use of field to vehicle yard at Wardman's Matlock Limited, the old Coach Road, Tansley. And again, we had a site visit here yesterday. Chris, are you taking this one? Sorry. And first of all, we will listen with care to our speakers, and I'll invite Councillor Vicky Rains, please. Vicky, you've got 2 minutes.
Yes, good evening. Tansley Parish Council object to this application for the following reasons. The land is greenfield and abuts the Lumsdale Conservation Area and the Bentley Brook tributary. The development fails to comply with the Lowlands Biodiversity Action Plan. There will be no net gain on the site, only ecological loss, which is also contrary to the local plan SO1, protecting green infrastructure. The site does not form part of an employment land identified in the local plan. It is actually outside the plan area. The land actually forms a very important green buffer protecting the residential area of Tansley. Additional development at this location will cause harm to the adjacent residential bungalow and be contrary to PD1, which states no development which causes visual intrusion, shadowing or overbearing effect and loss of amenity. The erection of a 1.8 metre metal security fence facing the residential property is not acceptable. Additionally, the officers suggest working from 9 till 5 on Saturday is antisocial and will cause a serious lack of amenity for the residents of the bungalow, wanting to use their garden at weekends for recreation and relaxation. MPPF guidance informs us all to think of future residents and the impact of development upon future amenity. 46 new homes are being built adjacent to the proposed site. Additional accommodation has been passed at Speedwell Mill. This extension of the industrial site into Greenfield and to adjacent residential property will cause a loss of amenity to future and present residents. It also goes against Derbyshire Dale's own green credentials. I also question why the application site was visited, but not the residents' garden, which will be affected by this proposal. I'm not sure this could be called equal opportunities. I don't think our resident has had the fair opportunity that the applicant has had by the lack of the visit.
Vicky,
Thank you.
you've gone over time, so, yeah. Our next speaker is Mr. Gary Swift, who's a local resident. Gary, again, you've got 2 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you for your time, everybody. I'm the resident, local resident, but I am actually the owner of the bungalow that's the adjacent property to Mr. Wardman's land. I don't understand an awful lot of the legalities of what you people discussed this evening. What I do know is that it's going to affect me, my family, in the respect that, keep it very simple. The proposed drawings that are up there now suggest there's going to be a lot of effort put into softening, to use some of the words I heard earlier, the view from our property down over the proposed yard. And that incorporates trees and lowering the land and making it so that when we look out, we're looking over the top of vehicles and things that are there. And that's admirable. I don't have a problem with that. What we do have to do, though, in order to see over that, we need to look through an industrial fence with barbed wire on the top. So to look through the bit that's going to soften things for us, we have to look through an industrial fence that it might as well not be there, because we you know, the view is already ruined. That fence starts within 20 feet of my kitchen window. It borders both sides of my garden, my back garden. So two-thirds of my back garden will be like Stalic 13, whatever you want to call it. That's the bit I have an objection to. I would also ask that the working hours on a Saturday be limited to maybe 12:30 or something reasonable, rather than 5 o'clock. I don't, in principle, I always try to come to things like this with a solution for people. Now, my solution to this, and it's within the ability of the committee here to put this in place, is simply, if you grant this, and that's entirely up to you guys, if you grant this, put the fence the other side of the trees that are going to be there to soften my view.
Unfortunately, you're well
That's
over
fine.
time now,
Okay.
but thank you for
No problem at all. Thank you.
expressing. Yeah. Who's dealing with this one? Adam? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Where are we? I'm losing the plot. Yeah. We listen to the applicant. Mr. Wardman, you've got 4 minutes.
Right, I'm Gordon Woodman, the founder of Woodman's Matlock Limited. We are a machinery dealer and have been there for 34 years. In view of what my neighbour has just said, I would like to say that we're certainly willing to move this fence, and the intention isn't for you to have fence immediately that you can look at. My impression was that the the screening that's going to be planted would hide the fence from your view. And we certainly need to talk about that. You know, I don't wish to have difficulties with my neighbour, and if that is his main concern, we'll certainly do something about that. Right. We propose to construct a stockyard for farm machinery awaiting repair or which are out of season, so machines will not be readily moving about. It's behind our building and it's not a prime display area where customers regularly look. They will be able to go there, but it is a stockyard, not the sale yard that we already have. The same arrangement works well in the yard across the road, which is adjacent to Scholes Mill, which we rent out as offices, and the occupants have never complained. Now, Old Coates Road through the industrial estate is the only way our machinery comes and goes. And as some members saw yesterday, Old Coates Road leading to Tansley Village is narrow, has a very rough surface, and any suggestion of us using this road to get stock into the yard is impossible. We will plant up the old field entrance with trees, and the stockyard will be dug 4 foot below, and it will be too deep for us to drive into through the existing field gate. Now, this excavation and a large tree planting scheme will also involve the moving of the main power cable to Tansley, which is expensive, but in order to be a good neighbour, we will dig this thing low so that he can't see over it, and neither will the residents at Tansley House development. There's been a mention of light pollution, but it certainly isn't from us because we don't have raised floodlights. Now, the bungalow was built in the early 1980s with an agricultural restriction, which has now been lifted, because the farmer who lived in it kept cattle and pigs in some of the buildings which are now converted to our stores and workshop. Several owners have come and gone, and none have complained about our activities, including the current owner, who would have been aware of the connections between the bungalow and the buildings when he bought it. The bungalow is screened from the proposed yard already by a very thick and tall hedge. We will extend this at either side and have submitted a scheme. We will excavate the stockyard so that the bungalow and Tansley House Gardens look over it. And it will be impossible for anyone to look into the garden or windows of the bungalow. And we will certainly see that the fence and the landscaping keep people well away. Quite happy with the rest of it. The only other thing that I'm not too happy about is that the proposed working hours for the contractors are from 9 a.m. to 5. Well, we can't find contractors who want to start at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the adjacent house builders have conditions of 7:30 to 5:30. So I don't quite understand why our contractors wouldn't be able to work similar times. The final thing is that for biodiversity, we've agreed to plant a field that we own, and we would need permission from you to take some surplus soil up there to improve the field.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for those two speakers. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Just to cover the main issue that was raised there in terms of amenity, the case officer, Gareth, as the applicant indicated, has worked quite hard with the applicant to resolve issues that were raised, mainly in terms of amenity, but also mitigating the impact of the development on the character of the area and the landscape. And the amended plan does now include quite a significant cut and fill to drop the development levels into the site and put significant landscaping in with the aim of protecting the amenity of neighbouring property and assimilating the development better into the landscape. I think there was consensus there about the fence that should be looked at. My view is that any fencing that's required for security purposes should probably be put along the boundary of the hard standing area itself rather than with the boundary of the neighbouring property. So I agree with what the neighbour said about pushing that back. So you're looking through the planting first with any fence beyond that. rather than being right on the boundary. There are planning conditions recommended to agree a landscaping scheme, and we would look to agree that as part of those details with the applicant. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, members? Kelda.
Is it possible to propose a condition that the planting essentially commence before the development of the site and construction or groundworks? Because I think a lot of the neighbours' concern is about the visibility of the site, and planting and landscaping will take time to develop before it can actively shield this site for them. So can we put that in as a condition?
The condition as recommended requires the planting to be implemented within the first planting season following the first use of the development, which is the normal approach. It's usually to mitigate following the occupation of the development. I think we have to be a little bit wary about whether it's reasonable to put that in before the development commences, bearing in mind the construction site itself will have a significant impact. And putting in the planting first, you might be jeopardising the planting by then excavating around it. So it might be better to do those excavations first, put the retaining walls in, and then plant. But ultimately, that's a judgment for members to decide whether the amenity impact needs to be mitigated before any other construction works are carried out.
So at the moment, the condition is that it's before the usage of the site rather than the completion of the...
So the hard landscaping, so the surfacing, any retaining walls has to all be finished before the site is first brought into use. The planting needs to be carried out within the first planting season following the first occupation.
Is it possible to implement a condition where it's the first planting season that is practicable within the development of the site, of the building of the site?
Yes, that's essentially the aim. So yes, that we could tweak the wording if that's desirable.
Rather than usage, because that could be...
So in terms of so following the completion of the building operations.
At the first practical opportunity within the building operation, I think, is my question. So it may be that there's groundworks required, and that impacts the ability to plant trees, but I don't think the whole site needs to be finished before you can plant these trees, and the trees will take a few seasons to become a shield for the neighbour.
Understand. Yes, I think that's a good idea. And it's going to depend on precisely when development happens, because obviously we're coming up to the planting season shortly, but we will have to, if permission is granted subject to the officer recommendation, the legal agreement will need to be completed, so the decision might not be issued for a couple of months. So I would suggest, if we go down that route as part of the landscaping scheme, to agree a timescale for the implementation of the planting, and then when we know exactly when those works you outlined are done, then we can specify exactly when the planting needs to be done with more precision, but to make sure it doesn't skip to the next planting season in the following year, which I think is the concern.
Councillor Sue Burfoot.
Thank you. I've got three, well, I hope they're short questions. I'm a bit confused about what the working hours are as proposed. That's the first question. The second one is on page, which page it is. Anyway, somewhere in the report, it says that the proposal brings the industrial estate to within 25 feet of the neighbour's kitchen windows. Now, I know planners, we don't normally talk in terms of feet, so is that an inaccurate statement? And the third one, which isn't really a question, but unfortunately I wasn't able to go on the site visits yesterday, but I'm very concerned that the members weren't taken to the bungalow to see the impact on that property.
Thank you for those questions. The working hours, there aren't any conditions recommended in terms of construction. We could impose a standard condition in terms of construction hours if members thought that was necessary. The condition in regard to hours is regarding hours of operation. Basically, at what times can equipment be moved on the site? Obviously, that can generate noise, which has an impact. And the hours that are stated in condition 12 are between 9 and 5, Monday to Saturday, and not at all on Sundays and bank holidays. Obviously, there have been representations on those precise times, and ultimately it's up to members to decide what times considered to be reasonable. The second question was about distance. I think, I'm not sure about feet. It may well be the case that the site boundary, the red edge boundary, is that distance, but the revised layout shows the hard standing inset from that boundary with planting in between. So I don't think it would be accurate to say it's 25 feet to where the actual equipment would be stored, but I haven't done that measurement. And the last point about site visits, members went around the site and were there for some time. Officers pointed out to members of the desire from the neighbour to visit that site, but ultimately, having seen the neighbouring property similar to a view up on the screen there, and understanding the relationship from the application site, members decided it wasn't necessary to visit that neighbouring property to understand impact upon its amenity.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, members? Councillor Buckle.
This is just a little bit of detail that's not really necessary, but Mr. Swift's window is just there, and we stood just this side of his fence. We did actually go up and look at the bungalow. It was raining, it was miserable, and we went and stood there. Yeah, we did actually get quite close.
Thank you, Councillor Buckle. Any further questions? We need then a motion, please. How do members wish to proceed?
Can I propose the motion to approve, but with a condition as discussed in the questions about planting the landscaping as soon as reasonably practical within the plan of the construction, essentially?
Yeah. Does that find a seconder, Councillor Peter Dobbs? Yeah. So we now have a motion. Members, do you wish to debate now the motion or comment any further? That's not Councillor Wakeman. Adam.
That is the officer recommendation, yes. So the storage area could only be, equipment could only be moved around within those hours, yeah.
Are members comfortable with that? Because you know, it was suggested that possibly consideration might be to 12:30 on the Saturday.
Can we just clarify that the actual building works, though, are allowable at a different time?
There's no condition recommended on construction hours. If members are minded to, we could impose a condition on that.
Members, we've got a motion before us then. All those in favour of approval of the application? And that appears to be unanimous. You're not. Right. Against? One against. Any abstentions? Thank you, Sue. So the application is carried. Thank you. The next application we've already determined earlier tonight, which was the Bumper Castle Farm one for the glamping. So we go on then to the final application on pages 191 to 198. Alterations to windows and doors. It's a resubmission at 2 Birchwood, Moor Court, Roston, Ashbourne. And we do have speakers. And first of all, we have speaking for 4 minutes, the applicant, Mr. David Lee. Right. In what capacity are you speaking? Should it be strictly 2 now? Yeah. Yes, you are still entitled to 4 minutes. Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
My name is David Lee.
Yeah.
I'm a retired chartered surveyor in practice for nearly 40 years. I own the Cubley estate. My nearest farm, Birchwood Park, lies no more than 300 yards from the subject property. The report states, and I quote, "The main issue to assess is the impact of the development on the character and appearance of the existing dwelling house and would not result in any unacceptable residential impacts relative to number 1 Birchwood Moor Court. With respect, I strongly agree. Both the owners of number 1 and the main farmhouse have written in favour of the proposals. The Oxford Dictionary definition of conservation is, and again I quote, the act of preventing something from being lost, wasted, damaged, or destroyed. The relevant test here is whether the proposals damage the building. In my opinion, they are favourable. The previous design was claustrophobic with dark, airless spaces and poor layout, not untypical of early conversion schemes from the late 1980s. The proposals here are modest, proportionate, and reflect modern taste for larger, open internal spaces, providing more light and better access to appropriately landscaped external features. I put it to you, members of the Planning Committee, how many of you have not applied these criteria to your own property? I certainly have. So what do these proposals amount to? The installation of a wider pair of French windows on the south elevation, a set of patio doors replacing an existing door, a new door which aligns better with the existing fenestration, and a first floor bedroom window deepened by about 4 courses to the existing on the west elevation. One larger window on the north elevation, which is deemed acceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, these are hardly radical changes. They reflect the evolution of this former barn whilst respecting the vernacular and its historical context. The applicant who is about to speak realizes the desire of the local planning authority to use traditional timber materials and would accept conditions to this effect. She also recognizes that a greater level of consultation with the planning officer would have assisted progress with the application. I would therefore urge the Planning Committee to grant permission to this application. Should members feel that more consultation is appropriate, I would ask that they defer and allow a period of 1 to 2 months for the applicant's planning consultant to join the discussion. Whatever happens, I believe it should not be necessary for this application to return to committee, but be resolved amicably under delegated powers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris, does the applicant get 4 minutes? Yeah. Claire, you're actually entitled to 4 minutes as the applicant, so you haven't got to rush if you thought you'd only got 2 minutes.
Okay. We purchased the property in spring 2022 as we fell in love with the view and the tranquility of the surroundings and hope it will be our forever home. It soon became apparent how little light entered the property, so with this in mind we thought about how we could improve the natural lighting in the house in a subtle way, as it is important to us that we retain its character and do not harm the original form of the barn. As you see from the plans, the changes to the building are very subtle but will make a huge amount of difference to the enjoyment of the property, as well as providing sustainability and climate change benefits. I work for the Church of England and support over 80 churches across 2 deaneries in the Derby diocese, so I often work from home, so the more daylight I can use would also be beneficial to minimise the use of electricity and boost the well-being of my family. We function as a family unit most of the time in the kitchen dining room area, where we can come back from work, sit down and relax. So if we're able to extend the opening, it would allow us to maximise daylight and be more connected with our garden too. I respectfully understand why there are policies in place to protect buildings, but we feel that our proposed plans are humble, minimal and would improve the property both internally and externally. The doors and windows we wish to install are of the highest quality and will complement the building, not result in harm to the structure. And we hope that you are able to support our application, which we feel will enhance the property, not detract from its character.
Thank you very much. Any further comments from the officers?
I think the issues have been expressed by the previous speakers on this application, so happy to take questions on this one.
Thank you. Questions, members, please? Yes, absolutely, Sue.
It says in the notes to applicant that the applicant entered into pre-application discussions, but the advice provided was not heeded in this case. Could you just explain what that advice was?
My understanding of the advice that was given was that we'd have expressed concerns relating to the impact of the alterations on the character and appearance of the property. The applicant did engage in pre-application discussions with us. We have to include a positive and proactive statement when we issue planning decisions, and it follows a standard paragraph that we use when we have to recommend refusal of planning applications. What we're effectively saying is that we've issued some advice. That advice hasn't been followed, and that in those circumstances, the requirement to engage in a positive and proactive manner is considered best served by issuing a decision as soon as possible to enable the applicant the right to appeal. But obviously, we've got an application before members, and the decision is ultimately a decision for members to take, not officers in this particular case.
If I may, Chair, could I just ask what sort of precedent you think this would set if we were to approve this?
What members have got to consider is, you can see on the plan in front of you that there are some alterations to windows and doors that are considered to be acceptable to the authority. The two doors that are not considered to be acceptable, two alterations concerned replacing a single door in the west elevation of building with patio doors, and also the patio doors in the south elevation, resulting in enlargement of an existing opening. When we consider conversion of farm buildings, we try and preserve their character and appearance, and openings are an integral part of the character of farm buildings, and they reflect how the buildings functioned as former agricultural buildings. So members just need to think about, okay, if we're introducing new openings, are those out of keeping with the type of openings that you expect to see on an agricultural building of this nature? And it's a matter of assessment and judgment for officers and members, and you're entitled to come to a different view if you think those openings are acceptable in that respect.
Thank you, Chris. Any further questions? Councillor Bourton.
Chair, I take on board what's been said, and there's obviously excuse me, some issues with contact and discussion. Clearly, the applicants here tonight wanting to continue with their application. So can we actually defer this for further discussion? Is there any point deferring it for further discussion?
Members need to be mindful this is the second application that's been submitted by the applicant. They've expressed a desire to have larger openings so that more light can enter the property. So my opinion is that the applicant would want a decision on this application. If members were minded to refuse the application, we could potentially look at entering into further discussions. But if members were minded to approve it, then obviously this is the optimal solution for the applicant.
John, do you wish to move a motion for approval or refusal, or will you just simply, which we can still do, ask the officers to reconsult and engage?
I think, Chair, in view of the presentations tonight, I think there's a willingness there to engage further, and so I'd put forward a motion that it's deferred, further discussion brought back to this meeting, or even the delegated powers as discussed.
And those discussions, obviously, with the agent and relevant people.
Of course.
Yeah. Does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. So we've got a motion. How do people feel about that? Is that an acceptable way to proceed? All those in favour, please show. Against? One against. Any abstentions? And one. So that motion is carried. So,
Chair, could I just, for clarification, ask, is it then deferred and delegated to the officers for decision,
That's a good point. Thank you, Peter.
which I would advocate.
How does the mover feel about that? Is that?
I think, as this is the second time before this committee, I think that would be more than satisfactory.
Yeah, yeah. You thought right.
Could I just seek some clarity on
Yes.
the deferment? Because if we get to a position where, as officers, we're not satisfied with the alterations that are being made, if you're giving officers delegated authority, what does that authority extend to refusing the application, or would you want the application to come back to the planning committee for further consideration in those circumstances?
I mean, this is a very fair point, and I'll compromise my impartiality now. I'm very much in sympathy. You know, life has to go on. This is a living building, and I would have thought, you know, a reasonable compromise, and it certainly seems to be reasonable for the applicant to, you know, have that light and all the rest of it. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If this does have to come back to committee, could I suggest that we do actually have a site visit on this one rather than it just come to the table?
Yeah.
Because as we can see by the pictures, it's an old farm building. The old farm building once had roof lights in the window, in the roof, like it's got on that elevation where you want the larger door. So I do think it has been altered significantly already, and I can't see the harm in what's proposed myself personally, but I'll go along with the deferral.
Yeah. Are members happy with that?
If I can comment,
just a
Chair,
sorry.
I support that proposal to facilitate compromise, but I do. My own view is that we can compromise to a certain point. I think my view is that if officers feel that the compromise which is suggested to them compromises the integrity of the supplementary planning document, which is the key issue here. We have that for a reason. I think we should remember why we have that policy. It is to retain the vernacular character of our historic barns. It's not to be awkward and not to prevent progress, but it is there for a specific reason. So I would support that, but I would say that I wouldn't expect the officers to compromise beyond a certain point.
To assist the applicant and officers here, could members just clarify, in terms of what they would expect to see in terms of a compromise? Are they happy with larger openings in principle? Does that apply to both openings, where there is a bit of a dispute there? In which case, if that was members' position, then perhaps recommendation to go against officer recommendation may be more appropriate. But are we saying that we're happy? Are we happy with the larger openings, and what is it that we're actually discussing in terms of a compromise?
Councillor Shelley, you don't want right. John.
Chair, I think these barns have been renovated and altered from in a great way from. Give and take as to the size of the lighting that's possibly needed in the modern times.
Yes, sorry, my only comment would be that this is not a listed building, is it?
To help officers, if, for example, on that plan before you, where you've got 3 lights in the bifold patio doors in the top left image, if that was reduced to 2, for example, would that be an acceptable compromise? Change and giving authority that that amount of change to the building is acceptable. I think we need that level of certainty, otherwise we're going to reach an impasse. It doesn't help the applicant, it doesn't help officers, and we're not really understanding, how we move this forward.
Councillor Lees.
Yeah, I understand your situation here, Chris, on this one. Could we not make that decision now, rather than because it looks like to me we're going to go round in a big circle and get nowhere.
I think if we can get a comment from carry on procedure, having voted on it, but it would make sense to to give a more positive, make a more positive determination.
The deferment isn't going to make a lot of difference to what's proposed and what's going to be acceptable. If that room wants a window in it, and that wants a double door in it to get in and out that door, which is the door that's serving at the moment isn't suitable to get in and out of properly. Where do you compromise with that? So I'm open to Kerry's suggestion on this one.
All right, thank you, councillors, for putting me on the spot a little bit here. Right, so what we've got here, we have a motion to defer, and it was only Councillor O'Brien's point about clarity about what the parameters for the compromise. And I know that someone's put forward about the size of the window. Well, Chris has put forward, would you accept 2 instead of 3 bifolding doors or whatever those doors are. So yeah, let me just have a think about this in terms of how we do move forward with this, because I don't think anyone's actually going to answer that question of what is acceptable or not acceptable at 4 hours into a planning meeting. So what I would, what my sort of thought process on this is that we haven't actually come to a decision yet, because there was a point of clarity. So it would be up to the motioner and the seconder whether, without the motion, without the clarity, will that still be a substantive motion? And if not, then we'll have to. I would suggest we start again, and decide if that's what you as councillors agree with.
What about a suggestion here, Chair, to move forward that we defer and a final decision is taken by officers in conjunction with the proposer and seconder?
Right, are members happy with that? What is the actual view of, we've not heard anything from the parish council, have we? We've heard nothing from the ward member, because this is, second time round. It would have been useful if the ward member perhaps had have come tonight and expressed an opinion. I just wonder if we can...
Could I just say that the ward member is seriously ill, Chair, so that's why he's not here tonight.
Well, I do apologise if that's the case. Do we just go simply for a site, defer it, have a site visit next planning meeting so that members can reach a rational judgment from what they see and get the whole picture, and then at the next meeting we come to a decision, however frustrating that must be for the applicant. But if I move that from the chair, that we instruct our officers to put this on the agenda, site visit, and come to a determination at the next meeting. All those in favour, please show. Against? That's unanimous. That's been carried then. Thank you for your patience. Just finally, we've got the appeals progress reports. Does any member wish to speak about any of those that are listed? If not, would someone just kindly formally move that we accept the report? Councillor Waitman, Councillor Slack. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. And I conclude then that the